Hey guys, this video is basically 2 years of SEO training packed into 2.5 hours. Yeah, we seriously made a 2.5 hour SEO training video. This literally took me 2 full weeks to put together. The problem with a lot of SEO info out there right now is it doesn't really show you how to execute on this stuff in the real world. So we're gonna change that. This video is a 2.5 hour walkthrough of me thinking through the SEO strategy for a brand new site, and then doing all the keyword research and topic research, and even thinking through the brand position and how that relates to our SEO strategy. And we'll even build a wireframe for a page so you can see how SEO can inform the layout and even the design of the content on your site. And you can see how all that's done, how we would really do that if this were a real client project from start to finish. So save this video somewhere. You're gonna wanna reference it later. I can promise you that. Save it to a list, bookmark it, email it to yourself, whatever it is so you don't lose it. And some of these topics are deep, so drop a like if you dig it, and drop a comment if you have a question, and I'll try to answer those as quickly as I can. This is also part of a larger training we do with clients, and because it's so in-depth, I went ahead and added chapter markers in the description down below, and also links to some files that I'll reference in some of the sections of the video so you can go download those. So yeah, 2 years of SEO training in 2.5 hours. I can't wait to see what you guys think. Let's get started. Okay, so for this chapter, I'm going to show you how to plan the content for a new site from scratch. Now, I wanted to use an example for this that meets a few requirements. First, we need the project to be simple to understand. We don't need really technical jargon that you might find in B2B or industrial spaces or even niche industries that most of us are not going to be familiar with. Second, it needs to be a project where we could create content at any stage of the funnel and it would kind of make sense. So for example, in SEO, my industry, that would not really make sense. Our content is mostly only going to generate brand awareness or demonstrate that we know what we're talking about, that we're experts, thought leadership, if you want to call it that. We want a project where we can create content for any stage of the funnel and it would make sense. But that leads into number 3 here, which is that this particular project will have some interesting little quirks about it. So it'll give us an opportunity to talk about in a little more detail how SEO thinking can fit into the broader marketing strategy and if and when SEO even makes sense to think about in the first place. So for this example, we're going to pretend we're a home remodeling company. And a remodeling company is a local business. So for this one, we're going to use Portland, Oregon as the city, and we're going to say we're a Portland remodeling company. And we're planning out the content for a new site. So let's talk a little bit about the company to set the stage for what we're going to do here. Now, I've never worked in this space before, but I've done some work in similar spaces, and I don't think this will be too complex, although we might not get everything perfectly right since we don't have access to real customers or a real business here, but I think we'll do pretty well for this demo project. And as we get into this chapter and start working through the details of the project, it'll make sense to think about where we might be able to improve our thinking with some of that more detailed knowledge of the industry or its customers. So I'll try to point those out as we get to those things. Okay, so we remodel homes. We are residential only. We don't do commercial. We'll do windows and doors as part of the project, but that's not something we're trying to sell separately. So we're not going to create window and door content. We don't do landscaping. If we need that for the project, we'll call in an independent landscaper. We don't do roofs either. If we need roof work, we'll call in a roofer to handle it. Our customers consist almost entirely of homeowners. We primarily want larger projects. We'll do some smaller stuff, but we really want room additions or kitchen or bathroom remodels. That's where the money's at for us. Also, we've been around for 15 years. And we are right smack dab in the middle of the market. In other words, we're about middle of our market as far as revenue size and just general brand awareness goes. Okay, so that's the background on the company. Now let's talk about how we're gonna approach the project. You've seen bits and pieces of this already, but we're gonna pull it all together here. So first, we're gonna define our goals and our target customer. We won't get terribly detailed on the target customer, but we'll talk about some issues around that related to SEO. Then we'll take a high-level look at the keyword landscape and start thinking about intent and why people are searching. Then we'll take a look at the competitive landscape. Again, still high level here. We won't do any detailed keyword research just yet. We'll use the steps up to this point to plan our strategy, and then we'll start some more detailed keyword research and then close with content planning. Okay, so that's the background info. Let's get started. This is a really quick lesson to talk about our goals. So if we're a remodeling company, then we'll say our ultimate goal is to drive business, actual revenue, but upstream from that are leads. Since our site is a lead gen site, it makes sense for this example to focus on leads as the primary conversion action. On sophisticated projects, you might get revenue and close rate data from a CRM and feed that back into your lead gen efforts. But even then, our website's primary goal for this project is to drive leads. Now, your primary goal may be different. It's really important to get incredibly clear on your primary goal. You may have several, or you may have different goals for different audiences, or even different goals for different sections of your site. This can sometimes be a source of confusion. For example, take an e-commerce retail clothing site where they sell products on the store, but most of the revenue is driven by email subscribers. People sign up via email, get a discount coupon, or find out about the new clothing line, and they click a link in the email, visit the site, and purchase. And that's how, say, 80% of revenue is generated. Well, in that case, the primary goal of the website might actually be just to get people to sign up to receive the emails. Yeah, they ultimately check out and purchase things on the site, but if the emails are the primary driver, then the website isn't just a place to purchase clothing. It's also a step in the funnel designed to get people onto that email list and then let the email drive most of the revenue, most of the selling. So you can imagine that might really change how you approach the content on a site like that. And that's a good example of why it's also really important to get super clear on your customer journey in detail, like every step they take until they finally take whatever final action it is you want them to take. Because that e-commerce clothing site, that was an actual project of ours, and that was really difficult to figure out that that's what was happening. Before that, the client thought social media was driving most of the revenue. Okay, but for us, for this remodeling company project, driving leads, we're gonna say that's our number one goal, and that's gonna be a low funnel goal, but there's a lot of competition in this space. So another goal we have is to attract potential customers who may not quite be ready to buy, but they're thinking about it. They're exploring, and we want them to learn about us and start building trust. So building trust and awareness is our second goal for the site. And in the remodeling space, my guess would be that the mid-funnel stage is pretty drawn out. I bet people start thinking about a remodel a year or more ahead of when they pull the trigger. So we'll have to keep that in mind as well. If that part of the buying process is so long, unless we have some way to speed up the process, it might only be worth going after low funnel keywords for the SEO piece of this project, and then maybe using some strategic pieces of content and some limited paid advertising to stay top of mind during that process. But for the sake of this example and to keep it simple and to keep the scope from getting totally out of hand, we'll go up to roughly mid-funnel on this project. Let's talk about our target customer for this project. So we're going to cover the keyword piece of this in more detail shortly, but it makes sense to start thinking about what type of person might be low to mid funnel and what they might be looking to do, what their needs are. So what would our low funnel customer be looking for? Phrased another way, what might their goals be? Or phrased in a way related to SEO, what might their intent be from a really high level? Well, let's think about it. At the low funnel end, they ultimately want to hire a company to help with this job. That might be their ultimate goal. But what other needs might they have? Well, the customer probably wants us to provide a good service, to actually offer the service that they're looking for. So if it's a bathroom remodel, is that something we have experience with? To be reliable and on time, to do what we say we're gonna do, to be honest, to be experts, to really know our stuff, to be good at the technical aspects of the job, to be a good value. The customer probably doesn't wanna feel like they're overpaid for the work, but they probably also don't wanna underpay. Now, I'm making a big assumption here that our audience are the value seekers, not like discount or lower end customers, but also not the people who want the highest end stuff they can get. This won't be the case for every company, but it's probably where the audience size and revenue opportunity intersect nicely. Some companies may want to target the higher or lower ends of the market, and so the target keywords might be the same, but the content and tone and all that might be different for those. Okay, so what about design? I mean, remodeling is a construction job, yes, but it's also a design job. Where should things go? What materials to use, how this all fits together into a coherent style. So obviously they probably want us to be good designers or have a solid designer on staff, or maybe even have access to a solid designer. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is the customer may not know there is design involved here. It seems obvious now that I've said it, but I'm sure it's not uncommon for customers to hire a company in this space and not realize that a major portion, perhaps the most important component of this, is the design and possibly architecture if an architect's required. Now, the opposite could be true as well. Maybe we don't even do the actual construction work ourselves. Maybe we contract construction crews to work for us on projects, and we're actually mostly a design and architecture firm, and that's like the real thing that we do. even though customers might think it's just building and construction. And so if people don't know about something, then they can't search for it, right? And so if that were the case, then maybe trying to rank for design-related terms might not be all that worthwhile. And vice versa, if customers all thought this was mostly a design and architecture job, maybe trying to rank for construction-related terms would not be the best use of our time. Now that may or may not be true in the remodeling business, but I wanted to point that out because it's really important to think about the fact that if your customers don't know something exists, they're not going to search for it. And if they think something exists, but it's called something else or referred to by a different name or something like that, then that's what they're going to search for. And so I've said this before and I'll say it again, but it's really important to start with where your customer is or where your audience is. Start there first and then give them the information you want to give them. Okay, so I mentioned architecture. How about that? I'm sure most projects probably don't require an architect, but I imagine larger additions or major projects might. So how's our skill there? Do we do that piece? Do we have a contract architect, or do we have solid third-party architects that we work with? And finally, I mentioned earlier that we don't do windows or landscaping or roofing, but what if our customer needs those for their project, but they don't want to go shopping for another company to handle it? Maybe they want us to act as their general contractor as well. So basically manage the whole process even if we don't offer windows or roofing ourselves. My guess is that's actually what most remodeling companies do. They're either general contractors or designers or maybe one of those things primarily, and then they farm out all the rest of the work that they don't do themselves. So there's a benefit here if we're acting as a general contractor and that the customer doesn't have to try to manage 2 or 3 or 4 different companies doing roofing and windows and framing and design and product suppliers and all these people that might be required for a bigger remodeling project. The customer won't have to manage those people themselves. Although that does bring up something I didn't really think of until I put this lesson together. I don't know if you've ever had your home remodeled in any way, a bathroom or a kitchen or something like that. It is expensive. It is really expensive. I got a quote to replace the hardwood floors in a 1,200 square foot condo the other day, and it was $18,000. And so maybe I'm wrong about the target audience being value seekers, because there are plenty of contractors that you can hire for any individual component of a remodeling job. You can hire carpenters and door and window people and countertop people and cabinet people and flooring people. You can hire all those people yourselves pretty easily. It's not that hard to find them. And even if you do hire all these people and manage them yourself, it is still insanely expensive. And so why hire us if we're basically just designers and general contractors, right? A general contractor just manages the project basically. So adding that layer will certainly save the customer time and headache, especially if it's a big job. I'd question if a normal homeowner could even manage a big construction job at all without a good bit of experience. But if it's just the bathroom, that can definitely be done. It can definitely be managed by the homeowner. And so really our value proposition here is that we save you that time and that headache. You don't have to find all these people and manage them yourself. And maybe on big projects, you couldn't even do that if you wanted to. So we do that piece for you. Plus, there are general contractors out there as well. There are individuals. Maybe they flip houses for themselves and also manage the process for clients as well. Little 1 or 2 person operations. They're going to be much cheaper than us if we have to feed the machine that is a larger company, a mid-market company in this space. And so we have a service here that is already incredibly expensive, and there are people that can handle the general contractor piece out there already, and they're probably a lot cheaper than us. And even if we're better than those individuals and they're not all that great, well, the homeowner is not really going to know that in most cases. And so our value is sort of minimal on smaller jobs. If you're not spending serious money, a project that would either be too complex for the average homeowner or one that the homeowner just didn't feel like managing themselves. In other words, the homeowner has money and they can buy their time back with it. They aren't as concerned with how much it costs. So if it's not one of those bigger jobs, then it might not actually be a good fit for us because there won't be enough perceived value added if the job is like 10 grand or less. So I'm actually thinking we should revise our target market a bit and say we're actually going after the upper middle to top end of the market. We want $30,000 plus jobs. We want high-end stuff because that's where most of our value is going to be put to use. And so here's our modified list of audience needs. I've updated number 7 there to reflect higher end, larger project experience. So I think these can all pretty much be grouped under 2 major needs here. Minimize headache, or basically make the process simple and easy. That might actually be more important for this audience than anything else. And then quality work. That's also important, but maybe there's a point where it's good enough. This isn't an art installation, right? We're not trying to necessarily win an award. Maybe the homeowner is, but probably not. maybe everybody that does high-end stuff is good enough, and the differentiator is how smooth is the process. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case at all. Okay, so here are our audience's needs grouped together under these benefits that they provide. And so now this can help us drive our content and SEO strategies. And we can start with this when thinking about our low funnel keywords and then work our way up the funnel from there. Okay, so now we know our goals, we know our target customers' needs, and this would be a time where you might want to layer in whatever else you have, like market research or personas or customer interviews, your overall marketing strategy, whatever else you have that might feed into what we've done in this lesson and help refine and improve it. Bring that all in at this point to help refine this research up to this stage. Okay, so that's our target customer. Now let's talk about who's searching in this space, because those are not always the same thing. Hey guys, this is John Crenshaw, your instructor. I really hope you guys are enjoying this course so far, this video so far. If you're liking it, do me a favor, drop a like, click the thumbs up button on this video, like this video, or drop a comment and let us know, because we have no way to know if you guys are liking this stuff unless you tell us. So let us know if you like it. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like button, drop a comment, let us know, because that way we know if we should do more of these. That's about it. I just wanted to let you guys know, remind you, drop a like if you're liking it. You know, it's basically letting us know this is good and you really want to see more of this kind of stuff. So, and that you appreciate it. All right. So back to the training, guys. See ya. Okay, so we've defined our target customer, but we also need to talk about our search audience, because those groups might be different. If you remember what we talked about in a previous lesson, the people searching in your space are not necessarily the same as your target customer. In our case, if someone searches Portland remodeling contractor, then they might be our target customer. In fact, those people are likely about as close as we can get to our target customer. But as we talked about, there might also be low-end customers searching that term as well. And then in a space like this, you also have DIYers, maybe not searching Portland remodeling contractors, but you might have some DIYer who's looking to do most of the work themselves, but then needs a contractor to help with some piece of it, say the design or something like that. And that's common. You almost always have different types of people with different goals searching on topics in a given space, and often searching the same search queries. So one of the important things to do when you start creating content is to get a handle on who these groups are and what they're looking to do. Because if most of the people searching a keyword are not looking for what we have, then we have to decide if it's worth serving those people with our content. Because if we don't, then we won't be meeting the bulk of the intent of those keywords, and we'll lose that intent advantage a little bit. Now that doesn't mean we can't still rank. As we've discussed, the other SEO components can make up for intent if they're significantly better than the competition, and that often does happen, but it's not a very good long-term strategy. Eventually somebody's going to come along and fill that intent gap. So let's talk about who might be searching in the remodeling space. So there's 3 places you can get this information, 3 sources of data that you can use to brainstorm this stuff. The first is your brain. If you know the industry and you can think about some keywords related to your industry, you can start picturing who might be searching those keywords. Second are your frontline people or the subject matter experts at your organization. Talk to them about the different types of people they encounter. Keep in mind, they're mostly encountering customers, so you might need to sit down and guide them in a brainstorming session with some instruction on what you're doing. You know, that you're trying to think of all the people that could be searching in this space, not necessarily just your target customers. And finally, you can use keyword tools to help out. So those first 2 only you can do, but let's jump over to our keyword tools and show how to pull out some audience insights, and then you can use this thinking internally and when talking to frontline people as well. So one important thing to note here is that what we're thinking about here when we're talking about audiences, all we're doing is thinking through intent at a really high level. So you can think of this as the very beginning phases of teasing out intent at a really high level, and we'll get much deeper later when we start creating content. Okay, so here we are at the Moz keyword tool, and we're just gonna search the really broad term remodeling. Now you can pick whatever you want here, but typically this early on, you wanna start as broad as possible. We'll click on keyword suggestions here. And here's the list that Moz gives us. So all we're gonna do is scroll through this list and think about the who question in our 5 W's framework. So who might be searching these keywords? And you can do this really quickly, just scanning the list and pulling out who could be searching for this stuff. Okay, so as I'm scanning this list here, I'm seeing a few that might be people looking to hire someone someone. So you can see remodeling contractor here, and you can see remodeling companies here. And so we talked earlier about how within the audience of customers searching for a remodeling contractor, there might be high and low end customers. You could probably even break that down even further if you wanted to, but I don't think it's necessary at this stage. Okay, so I'm gonna break out my notepad here and just start taking some notes on this. So we have high-end customers, we have low-end customers. We have some really weird ones here like remodeling synonym and remodeling definition. I'm just gonna ignore those and say that could be anybody. They're too broad to say at this stage. I see remodeling bathroom ideas here. So let's think about this one. Who might search ideas? Well, I can think of a few types of people that might search for that one. So I think you have customers for sure, our high and low end customer. I could see them searching for ideas earlier in the funnel or earlier in their buying process while they're doing research. I think you also have DIYers, so do-it-yourselfers. These are people who want to do some work on their own home, remodel their own place. In fact, that's probably by far the largest audience in this space, the DIYers. You have entire television channels devoted to this. HGTV, for example, is an entire TV channel devoted to remodeling and topics like that. So that's a huge audience if it has a dedicated television channel. I think you also have professionals in this space searching that. You can imagine people who do this for a living might be searching for ideas or inspiration for their next project. I think in a space like this, you might also have dreamers. Those people who really want to have this wicked high-end home. I think we all sort of have a little bit of that dreamer in us, so they may never actually spend the money or pull the trigger, or if they do, it might be relatively small stuff, but they just love looking at this stuff online or watching HGTV and stuff like that. So we might call these people window shoppers as well, because again, maybe they'll do some work someday, either on their own or maybe they'll hire a company, but they don't have any intention right now. They're just having fun with no intention of moving forward with a company or hiring somebody yet. Okay, so we have customers, we have DIYers, and again, this is probably the biggest audience in this space if I had to guess. Then you have the pros, and then you have the dreamers or window shoppers. So you see, we just pulled out 4 audiences or 4 types of people searching in this space from a single keyword, just from remodeling bathroom ideas, just from thinking about who would be searching for that. Okay, so I'm just gonna go page by page through this list, really quickly scan it, and pull out any other groups I can find, and then we can talk through those after I've done that. Okay, so I actually didn't find any other groups. You may have noticed I really only went a few pages deep on this list of keywords on Moz. Now, if you wanted to be super thorough or you were iterating on this, like you already did a lot of this work and now you're back for round 2, maybe then you'll want to try different seed keywords or go a little bit deeper into the later pages. But my guess is we're not going to find that much more in this space. So the only thing I found that gave me pause were these keywords related to HGTV. So people searching HGTV house design or HGTV remodels and terms like that. I thought for a second maybe those people are a little bit different, but then when I thought about it, I think those people fit one of our existing groups as well. They're probably either the dreamers or window shoppers. That's probably most of them. A few could potentially be customers, as they're coming up on a remodeling job or really seriously considering it. Maybe they also get a little more interested in watching remodeling shows on TV. I think that may be the case, but it's definitely not going to be the majority of the HGTV audience. And then I also think there could be some pros in there. So I actually don't think we need another group for these people interested in HGTV or television shows or anything like that. I think they're covered under what we have already. And so that's really it. These are the 4 audiences searching in this space. And you can sort of think about these as really high-level intent buckets as well, right? So look, the customer group is obvious. They're just looking to buy, to complete a project at some point in time. Then we have the DIYers. They're looking for ideas for their next project, or maybe for help with one component of their project, or best practices or tools or something like that. Then you have the pros. Well, they're probably the same as the DIYers, but the pros probably already know a lot of the tools and resources out there. So they're probably more looking for ideas or inspiration or something like that, rather than to find new tools or new resources. And finally, we have our dreamers. Our dreamers' intent is, well, just to dream, to get entertainment or kill time, or just imagine how cool it would be to win the lottery and spend gobs of money remodeling everything in their house. Or maybe they're even dreaming about becoming a pro, to get into the industry, to start flipping houses or get a remodeling job or something like that. So you see, from grouping the search audience, we've thought about the who in this industry. And from that, we've really quickly been able to just start thinking about intent, to start forming a picture of what those audiences might want to do. and each audience is going to search a little differently. One final note, your space may have a lot more audiences than just the 4 we've identified, right? These are specific to remodeling, but you may have a lot more than 4 audiences. Now, there's some complications we're going to talk about in a later lesson for this project, but the service offering we have is fairly simple. We remodel houses. That's really it. It's not uncommon at all to have very different audiences for different product or service lines. So for example, if we also did windows and roofs and landscaping, well, that would suddenly dramatically expand our list of potential audiences. Now, they may all still fit within the 4 audiences we defined here, but it would be worth going through this work for each of those product or service lines separately, just because they will be different in some ways. For example, you're not going to have many DIYers in the roofing space. People don't typically do their own roofs. Whereas in remodeling, my guess is the bulk of searchers are probably DIYers. So if we also did roofs, I'd go through this entire exercise for the roofing audience as well. Part of the reason I picked remodeling for this example project is because there are some really interesting things to think through related to the competition and the target audience. There's some nuance there, and we talked about that a bit in a previous lesson. So let's talk about the competition a bit from a really high level. So the goal of this lesson is just to get a feel for the competitive landscape as a whole. We're not evaluating specific keywords or topics or going deep on anything necessarily just yet. Instead, we just want to spot check a variety of keywords that the 4 types of searchers we identified in the previous lesson might be searching up and down the funnel. And the goal here is to see who's ranking in this space, to start thinking about intent a little bit, and to figure out how difficult it might be to compete. That's going to inform our SEO strategy. So let's go search Google for some of what we think might be relevant keywords for us and see what we find. Okay, so let's start with our most obvious low funnel term. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we could imagine our target customer low in the funnel looking at hiring a contractor might search Portland remodeling contractors. And if we check out who's ranking, we see there's a few competitors here, but also quite a few of these directory sites. In fact, this is similar to the flight searches we looked at earlier. In this case, there's about just as many directories, maybe more than real life competitors. You can see Yelp and Home Advisor and Angie's List and Porch and Houzz taking up half the front page. And you may have heard of these sites. They're all pretty big sites. And if you think about the intent of that search, Portland remodeling contractors, it's definitely got list intent. Remember we talked about that? These people are probably looking for a list of contractors. And these directories meet that intent better than any one remodeling company is going to be able to do. But these directories also have reviews. And these are third-party reviews on these sites, so they're probably going to be trusted a little bit more than any testimonials we could add to our site ourselves. So if we look at the components of SEO, the 3 that we're paying attention to in this course, unless we can come up with some creative ideas, the directories probably have us beat on intent, which feeds into user behavior, and they probably also have us beat on brand awareness. Now, we'll definitely have them beat on EAT, but now they've got us on 2 out of 3, and intent's important. So even for our low funnel terms, we don't exactly have a huge SEO advantage over what's already ranking. Okay, so what about our real life competitors ranking for this search? Let's take a quick look at those sites and make sure they're not just terrible. That's primarily what we're concerned with. We just want to see if everybody's doing an okay job or if there are just some terrible sites ranking that would indicate there's like a big, easy gap to fill. So I'm going to poke around these sites and try to figure that out. Okay, so these sites aren't bad at all. I think we can definitely do better, but overall they look like decent sites. They're all legit competitors, actual companies in this space who have put some time into their sites. They all have portfolios and lists of services and things like that. So again, I think we can do better, just not dramatically better. So with that in mind, their ability to meet intent is probably fairly similar to ours, assuming we don't come up with some creative tricks. So how about brand awareness and EAT? Well, at this stage, we can assume those are pretty much going to be the same. Now, if this is your project and you're operating in a space, you should have a pretty good handle on how your organization stacks up on these things in a lot more detail than we'll be able to figure out here, or maybe someone at your organization will, but we need to get a read on that for ourselves for this project, and there may be cases where you don't have that information, so I'll show you how to do that really quick, how to get a quick read on brand awareness and EAT. So let's start by checking out Mondesign first. Now, I typically jump straight to their About Us or contact pages, and I'm looking for indications of their size and how well known they are. So headcount is an easy one. How many employees do they have? We can check out office pics if they have any. You know, if they have their name on a building downtown, that might be an indication that they're pretty big. We can also look for publicized EAT, so any press or positions of authority they might hold. Okay, so here's Mon's contact page. I'm just seeing one office address listed. So if we jump over to their About Us page, okay, so it looks like they have about 14 people here. So I don't know how big these companies typically get, but my guess is this probably puts them about mid-market, maybe slightly above that. I can't imagine companies in this space get that big. Okay, so let's check out Mosaic. And it looks like they have a team page, so let's take a look here. So they only have 2 people listed, but they might not be showing everybody, that's possible. So let's check out their contact page and see if they have multiple offices or something like that. Okay, so they only have one office address listed. Okay, so here's their office. So they don't have like their name on a building downtown or anything like that. So it seems like a fairly modest office. So we can assume they only have 2 people. And again, if this is critical info, you'd want to find out in a little more detail, and chances are you're going to know if these are actually your competitors. So one question I have here is, would these guys be on the lower end of the brand awareness spectrum just because they have only 2 people? That's usually the case, but not necessarily. So they may be the most high-end boutique company in the space, like maybe everybody knows them, but they want to stay small. Or maybe they're like the hosts of like a show on HGTV or something like that. That would have a big impact, but their site doesn't scream super high end to me. I don't see any information about being on TV or something like that. They do have a press page here, so we can take a quick look at that. And they actually have a decent amount of press here for what appears to be a really small local company. So that's a really strong sign for them. It's not common for a brand new unknown company to get a ton of press unless they just blow the doors off something or do something crazy, or they're really creating a market with a totally new product or service. So I think even if they're just a 2-person shop, you know, compared to Mon's 14 people, Mon probably has more brand awareness just because they do more jobs, but these guys aren't too bad off. So we'll say they're like mid-market, maybe a little below that as far as brand awareness goes. So let's jump over to Hammer and Hand here. And right off the bat, this site just feels like it might be a larger company, maybe on the upper end of the residential market. And look, you can see they have offices in Portland and Seattle. And I also see a commercial nav item up here in the top. So if they do commercial, I was actually going to say you probably can't get all that big in this space without also doing commercial work. So that also suggests they might be the largest of our 3 competitors. Now let's see if they have, they have a team page. Let's check that out. Wow, yeah, so they have 30 plus people here. So we can be fairly confident that they're gonna have the most brand awareness of the 3 of our ranking competitors in this space. Okay, so here's how we stack up in terms of brand awareness and EAT. Hammer and Hand is the biggest at very roughly the upper end of the residential remodeling market. Then we're tied with Mon for second in the middle of the market. Then Mosaic is the smallest. But the fact that Mosaic, which appears to be a 2-person company, is ranking at all, that suggests we should be able to compete. If all I saw were directories and huge companies, then I'd be worried about, you know, a relatively small mid-market remodeling company being able to get into those top 10 results. But the opposite is true also. If we were brand new and unknown, well, then it's going to be an uphill battle because even Mosaic has some pretty solid press, and we probably just won't rank if we're new in this market until we get to at least that level. And this is a really bad mistake I've seen happen a lot. You often see brand new companies spinning their wheels using SEO as their only marketing strategy. That almost never works, and this is usually the reason. They just have dramatically lower perceived EAT and brand awareness compared with the ranking competition. And then if they're also going up against national brands for some keywords and maybe even directories like we're seeing in the remodeling space here, I've seen companies do this for years and burn through all of their money. And that's why I almost never advise companies to do SEO really early on, unless it's just a small part of a much larger sort of blitz marketing campaign. So in other words, unless they're well funded. Okay, so that's a quick look at a low funnel term. Let's jump back to Moz here and pick out a mid to high funnel term and do the same thing. So how about this one here, remodeling bathroom? This could be a mid to high funnel term. This person might be looking for bathroom remodel ideas or inspiration with the intent to hire somebody later. So let's search Google for this one and see what's ranking. Okay, so really quick, we can see all kinds of stuff showing up in the search results. We see product ads on the right here. Then we have a maps pack showing local businesses here. Beneath that, we have some images. Some people also ask questions. And then we have videos here. These videos are all DIY focused. Well, at least 2 of them are. You can see they even include the word DIY in the video title. Oh man, but then we have Home Depot, House.com, this old house, HGTV. I don't know who BHG is. Home Advisor. Okay, so these sites all have way more brand awareness than us. It might be hard to compete no matter what we do, at least at this stage for this keyword. So let's check out another keyword. So I see remodeling cost here. Let's get maybe a little bit more specific and search something really similar, but just slightly more specific and call it bathroom remodeling cost. Okay, so we have Home Advisor right there at the top. There's Home Advisor again, Angie's List, Thumbtack, The Spruce. All of those I think I've heard about. BathroomRemodel.com I have not. GoSmith.com, this looks like a Portland company, so that's a good sign. It means not only national sites are ranking for this term. That doesn't necessarily mean they're Portland companies. These might actually be national companies with localized landing pages where they're just trying to rank in all the local areas, and that does appear to be exactly what these guys are. So it's not a local company. It's not as good as I originally thought, but it is a localized page ranking for that search query. So that's a good sign. It indicates we might be able to do something similar, localize our content where it makes sense. So we'll talk about that later. But overall, we have some pretty big sites ranking here, but then we also have a few that I haven't heard of, and then a couple of these localized pages. So this is not quite as bad as the other search. The fact that we're seeing localized pages rank is a really positive sign. Now, you will not always see that. You often won't see that, even if it's possible to get a localized page to rank. So we'll talk about this strategy a little bit later, but don't rule this out if you don't see localized pages ranking. Again, this is going to make a lot more sense later once we get into it. Okay, so that's a really high level look at the competition. So you could repeat this exercise and pick a few more keywords if you wanted to just make sure you had a feel for the landscape. But I think for us, this is all we need. So let's sum up what we did and also what we found here. So first, we started with what will probably end up being one of our primary target keywords or one of our primary low funnel target keywords, Portland remodeling contractors for this project. This worked for us, but if you offer a really broad range of products and services and they're all different enough to have different competitive landscapes, you might have to go through this exercise with all of those. We also looked at what we think is a mid to high funnel term as well. And then we Googled those words and looked at what was ranking. And then we compared them to ourselves on intent, brand awareness, and EAT. And so what did we find? What are our takeaways? Well, we found our low funnel terms have major sites ranking that probably have us beat on 2 out of 3 of our SEO components. We do have a few competitors showing up, so that's a good sign. It means it's possible for a remodeling company to rank for the low funnel stuff. Now, the mid to high funnel stuff is largely populated by major national or global brands as well. Plus, if you think about it, if we're a Portland remodeling company, out of all the people searching a mid to high funnel term like bathroom remodel or bathroom remodel cost, the vast majority of people searching those terms are going to be outside of our target market. So even if we do rank for those terms, even if we somehow manage to outrank these huge brands, most of that traffic, almost all of it in fact, either won't be in our market or won't ever hire a company like us. Now, the exception to that might be those localized pages that we mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about those shortly. There's something we're going to want to consider for this project, and that is the type of business that we're in as a remodeling contractor. So there's this economic classification of products and services. I'm just going to call these goods for simplicity's sake for this lesson, even though that's not entirely accurate in our case. So anyway, this classification is SEC, which stands for Search, Experience, and Credence. And these classifications are based on how easy it is for a consumer or the buyer of a good, a product or service to evaluate or to get information about that good. And so a search good, the S in SEC, is one where that good can easily be evaluated by the purchaser before it's purchased. Now, these tend to be simple products, often commodities. So one example might be clothing. If you head down to your favorite clothing retailer to buy a new shirt, you can pick that shirt up. You can inspect the stitching and the material. You can go and try it on and see how it fits. You know what color it is. You know if it has sleeves or buttons or zippers or whatever. You can get all this information pretty easily and quickly just by looking at the shirt. It's fairly simple to evaluate a shirt. Now, I'm sure we've all had that experience of taking home a piece of clothing, wearing it for a while and deciding we don't actually like it for some reason, and we just didn't notice or think of that reason before we purchased it. But for the most part, you can evaluate pretty much everything about a shirt before you buy it. And it's fairly simple. You just go to the store, you look at it, you try it on. And this is the key differentiator of a search good. You don't have to buy the shirt first before you have most of the information you need to evaluate it. You can evaluate it almost almost entirely before you make the purchase. So let's contrast that with an experience good. Now, an experience good is one that you cannot easily evaluate until after you've already purchased it. Now, one way I remember this is to think of an experience good as something you have to experience first before you can evaluate it. So a restaurant is a great example of an experience good. You can't easily tell if it's a good restaurant until you eat there. So you have to go experience it first. Other examples would be hotels, hairdressers, theme parks, vacation destinations, movies. Anything you have to buy first, then evaluate second, falls into this category. Okay, so the next category, the C in SEC, are credence goods. Now, credence goods are interesting because credence goods are impossible to evaluate even after you've purchased them. Now, that sounds crazy, right? What can we not properly evaluate after the fact? Well, lots of stuff, it turns out. Lots of B2B stuff falls into this category. A lot of services fall into this category. So take legal services, for example. Let's say you hire an attorney to write some business contracts. The attorney writes your contracts, you pay the attorney, and then you have the contracts. But not being an attorney well-versed in contract law yourself, do you have any real ability to evaluate how good those contracts are? Like, how well will they hold up in court? Are the clauses even legal? Was there anything major that the attorney missed? You can't possibly know that stuff before you've purchased the contracts, but you also can't know that stuff even after you've purchased the contracts because, well, you're not an attorney. That's why you hired an attorney in the first place. Lots of stuff falls into this category. Legal services, accounting services, marketing services, medical services, so like doctors and hospitals. Lots of stuff falls into this category because it's based primarily on how difficult it is to find the information you would need to evaluate the good before and even after the purchase. So if you can easily get most of what you'd need to evaluate the good before you buy it, then it's a search good. If you have to buy it first before you have that information, then it's an experience good. And if you won't know before or after you buy it, then it's a credence good. Now, this SEC classification is typically viewed in a spectrum, but for the most part, as a remodeling contractor, we provide a credence service. It sort of depends on the exact service being provided, the exact scope of work. Like, is this entirely a design project or an architecture or engineering or construction, or are we just doing the flooring or cabinets or something like that? But if you're hiring us to do this work, you're probably not going to know for sure whether we're good at what we do even after you hire us. Yeah, you can evaluate how smoothly the process went or how much it sounds like we know our stuff. You can evaluate if the design met your personal subjective opinion of what is good or bad design. But if we tell you, for example, to use bamboo versus oak for your floors, are you really going to know if that's actually a good idea or if we're just trying to maximize our profit? Will you know if the chemical composition of the concrete we poured was adequate for your foundation work? What about the waterproofing? Did we do it the best way, the cheapest way, or the most common way? Those all might be a little different. Unless you really know your stuff, you probably are not going to be able to evaluate most of this before or after the fact. So there's a major information asymmetry here. Us, as the remodeling company, we know way more about this, and it would be hard for a customer to get all the info they need to fully evaluate everything we did even after we did it. Now, building regulations and inspections and things like that can help to level out this information asymmetry a bit, and that's really what their purpose is, but there's still a pretty big asymmetry. And because of that, the interesting thing about credence goods is that they tend to be evaluated on things that don't actually even indicate quality at all. Instead, they're evaluated on other, more available information that the consumer or the buyer does have access to. So, for example, hospital patients have been shown to accurately report information on whether a physician was respectful, attentive, clear in explaining clinical issues, and operated a clean and efficient office. These same patients were found to be inaccurate in reporting on the technical quality of the care that they received. And those other things they did use to evaluate the physician, the cleanliness of the office, how respectful they were, stuff like that, those things were not even highly correlated with the technical aspects of quality care. And what's wild is this happens even when quality metrics about physicians are available. People just ignore them or don't trust them. So credence goods are typically not judged by their quality as much as by other, more easily available information. And so the things that tend to convince customers to purchase a credence product or service are things other than the technical quality of the work. So what kind of things are those? These are typically things like expert third-party reviews and opinions. These tend to be weighted much more heavily than customer reviews or opinions. Prestige signals like winning, remodeling, or design awards, in our case, being mentioned in major publications like design magazines or on TV or mentioned by well-known influencers. being on TV as an expert commentator, like on the news or something like that, talking about the home building industry. Authority signals will help here too, so being elected to the local builders association board or something like that. And then I bet the subjective sort of wow factor in our project portfolio or the website as a whole will come into play a little bit here as well for this particular project. Other things are going to matter during the project, like how well we communicated, our ability to manage the project and hit deadlines, stuff like that. But that stuff isn't available until after the purchase for the most part, so it won't really sell new clients on why we're awesome. Now, we obviously have to know what we're doing and we have to do decent work, but all these other things are really going to have a much bigger impact on new customer acquisition and evaluation by existing customers than the technical quality of our work. That just has to be pretty good. It's got to be above some standard. All right, so there's something we should really talk about at this point. Notice that none of those things have anything to do with getting ranked in search. So if we spend all our marketing and PR budget as a remodeling contractor trying to get ranked in search, and we don't spend time and effort lining up all those other quality indicators, we probably won't drive much business even if we do get ranked. Now, what'll actually happen is our user behavior signals will probably be bad enough that without all those other credence indicators of quality, then we probably won't get ranked anyway unless we're just like significantly larger or more well-known than everybody else or something like that. But this is a really common mistake we see businesses make a lot. They think getting ranked is all they need to do to drive business. And if you're on the search side of the SEC continuum, then yeah, increasing visibility alone will probably have a big impact on revenue. Just getting your name out there, getting found, is going to have a huge impact. But as you move more into the experience goods, visibility will still be crucial, but it's not going to be all you need. And the closer you get to the credence side of the continuum here, you'll start to have a really hard time driving more business just with increased search visibility. So this fact that we're a credence service will factor into our overall marketing strategy, our overall SEO strategy. Now, of course, if we're mid-market in this space, it's highly likely that we have already done a lot of this stuff, but it would be a huge mistake for a brand new company in this space to go after SEO before they have all those expert reviews and awards and major PR wins and stuff like that. Hey everybody, if you have made it this far, first let me say you are a freaking rock star. Your spouse or partner should give you a back rub. Your boss should give you a raise. Everybody in your life should tell you how amazing you are because you are charging through what is probably the longest video, definitely the longest video I've ever watched on YouTube for sure. So give yourself a pat on the back. You deserve it for, just getting through this whole thing and learning and bettering yourself. That's freaking amazing, like it really is. You should be proud of yourself. I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to say, if you guys are liking this, let us know. I mean, if you're not liking it too, let us know in the comments. Let me know like what we can improve. If you don't like it, if you think it's too advanced, too boring, too slow, whatever it is, if I'm the most annoying voice you have ever heard in your entire life, please let us know. I want to know that too. But if you do like it, hit the like button, the thumbs up button down below the video. Hit the like button. Comment and let us know, or share the video with somebody. That's a great way to let us know that that's happening. So if you guys let us know that you really like this stuff, we'll do more of it. So yeah, anyway, back to the video. Enjoy it. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. See ya. Let's talk strategy. Now, what's cool about this project is there are all these little nuances that we can talk about. So let's recap our research up to this point. We should be able to compete with our real life competitors in search for our low funnel terms, although it's definitely going to help if we can provide a much better experience for searchers. Otherwise, Google's going to be hesitant to swap us out if we're basically just the same as what's already ranking. We also saw that the directories are going to have an advantage over us on those low funnel terms unless we can get creative. For the mid to high funnel stuff, we've got some pretty serious competition. I'd be really hesitant to pursue a short or even midterm strategy of trying to compete with those sites, although we did see a few localized pages ranking for that mid-funnel term we researched, and so maybe that's a direction we can go here. We also talked about search versus experience versus credence goods and services, and how we're a credence service, and because of that, just getting ranked will not be enough to drive business. So yeah, the goal of SEO is to improve visibility in search, but we should be really careful to take a step back and think about how SEO fits into the broader marketing strategy. Because we're a credence service and visibility or awareness is not the most important thing for credence services. I mean, it's important. If people don't know you exist, then they can't hire you. It's just that it's not going to have a big impact if we don't tackle a few other things first. And so before we spend money on SEO, we need to get these things ironed out first. Number one is our website design should have a pretty serious wow factor, particularly because a good chunk of what we do is going to be design work. We better have amazing high quality photos and videos for our portfolio. Again, people should look at this stuff and say, wow. We need to get those authority and prestige signals just off the chart. Get our president or CEO or one of our leadership team on the local building or construction board or whatever organization there is like that in this industry. We want to win awards and get press. So I'd do some work just to win awards, like pick a few projects, even do them at cost or a slight loss if we have to, maybe for a nonprofit or for a good cause or something like that, with the specific goal of creating something that looks freaking amazing and winning awards and getting press for it. Plus, we could use this opportunity to give back to a worthy organization or a worthy cause, which we should be doing anyway. And so we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. Now, we want our work showing up in Architectural Digest and Better Homes and Gardens and just get as much of that expert third-party press and recognition that we could possibly get. And I would do all this before I did any other type of marketing. Put the entire marketing team on helping figure out how to do this stuff first. Because if we don't have this, then any other advertising or SEO or anything really is just not going to be that effective. So that's number one. But like I said before, we're roughly mid-market. So it's very likely we've already done this stuff, or at least some of it. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have got to mid-market to begin with. Now, it's probably not as much as we need, so we could probably use some more. But, this course is about SEO and we need to talk about content and move on. So we're going to just assume this stuff is already done. But I wanted to point this out because I wanted to show you how to think about where to prioritize SEO within the broader marketing mix. Okay, so let's talk about low funnel keywords. If it's up to me, I want to get ranked as quickly as possible, but I also know to do that, we'll have to provide a much better experience than what's already ranking. But that's tough because our real life competitors are fine. Nobody has like a terrible website experience. There aren't major gaps that we could fill there. And then we also have the directories to think about as well. So what do? Well, if you can't compete with the directories, become the directory. Seriously though, I would just create a directory page on the site listing all the remodeling contractors in the area. Maybe go sum up the reviews you find online and rank order them by those reviews. Yes, we'd be listing our competition on the website, but we've actually done this and it's incredibly effective. Now, I know half of your brains are short-circuiting thinking, oh my gosh, we got to talk about our competition on the website. And I see that all the time. The suggestion is often met with resistance. But at the end of the day, it's the easiest, fastest way that we can provide a dramatically better experience than what's already ranking. Enough so that it'll probably get us ranked really fast, especially if we're mid-market already. We'll talk about another approach as well in a minute, but this is the aggressive approach that would get us there the fastest. And after we rank, we can do whatever we want. We can remove that page later if we want to, or maybe we only put companies on our list that serve the lower end of the market, so they aren't actually our direct competitors. That would actually be even better because we decided earlier that most people searching in this space are probably looking for either DIY or help with those smaller, lower cost projects. So a list of remodeling companies that serve that lower end of the market might actually be a better experience for a lot of the people searching in this space. Now, this does not always get approved. There's some weird thing where people don't want to acknowledge that their competition even exists. But this strategy is mind-blowingly effective. And that's because what this does is it shifts our score on the SEO components compared with our competition. By adding what is basically a really useful directory page to our site, we've hit intent much better. We still have high EAT, and now only the larger directory sites have more brand awareness than us, but we've totally changed the balance of power here. So if we didn't do that, we could still potentially get ranked because either way, I think there's an opportunity for us to hit intent better than the other ranking remodeling companies right now. And we'll talk about that when we get into content. But this is a clever little trick you can pull, not only in situations like this, but you can use this directory strategy in all kinds of places. If you're targeting search queries that have the intent to find a list of almost anything, but companies in this case, I mean, we've used it to form partnerships with companies in similar industries to our clients. It's just crazy the amount of amazing stuff you can do with this. And it's not really all that much different from all the listicles you see all over the web, except that it seems like nobody has thought to list companies instead of just like the top apps or the top websites in the space or something like that. So there's a huge amount of low-hanging fruit here. You're only competing against the directories in almost every case. Everybody else is just terrified to talk about their competition. So anyway, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. I'd highly recommend this directory strategy to fast track our ranking progress. Then after that, I'd work on low funnel content, and we'll primarily use our service pages for that, possibly portfolio pages as well. Now, how about the mid to high funnel content? So like I said, I don't think it's worth competing with those big brands for national rankings directly. However, I do think we can still use some valuable mid to high funnel content at this stage, and we'll use two strategies for that. First, we'll gather a list of questions our customers have asked us in the past that we think prospective customers would want to know. So we're totally ignoring keyword tools for this, and we're just asking our team to build a big list of customer questions, and then we'll go publish blog posts answering those questions. And I'd put the focus on questions that we could see customers asking before they've hired a company, assuming here our goal is to drive leads. And so the other benefit to this, though, is that we can use this as a library where we can send our existing customers for detailed information when they do have these questions. So we can use it to improve the customer experience, and we can even use it to get our staff all on the same page about the positions we take on certain topics and our processes and how we phrase things and all that kind of thing. And so this is a really effective approach that can help us both with SEO, but also just getting our team on the same page and making it easy for existing customers to get answers to their questions. Okay, so second, we'll pick out some keywords that might be different for different locations. So for example, we might not want to compete for the search term bathroom remodel cost, but costs might vary by location with materials and labor costs. And so I could see us writing a blog post titled average cost of a bathroom remodel in Portland, Oregon, for example. And this type of content could rank for the term bathroom remodel cost Portland, but it could also potentially rank in customized search results when someone in Portland searches the more generic bathroom remodel cost. Google might customize those results and rank our blog post for that person if they're actually in Portland. And we saw that happening in a previous lesson a little bit. Now, some of our mid to high funnel content just won't be suited to a localization strategy like that, but some of it will, and so we will publish that stuff. Okay, so back to our overall strategy. First off, we're assuming we already have an epic website, incredible project images and videos, and we have all these authority and prestige signals locked down. If we don't, we stop here, we go make those things happen, come back to SEO after that. Oh, and make sure all that EAT is just plastered all over the site. Nobody should be able to escape our website without seeing all of the awards we've won, publications we've been mentioned in, positive expert opinions that have been published on us, or any of the authority that we've been granted by industry groups or organizations. Follow them around with remarketing ads if we have to. Just make sure if we have those things, those EAT signals, everybody sees them. Second, we're going to hack intent by creating a directory page listing remodeling contractors. This will dramatically improve how well we'll meet intent, and so it'll get us ranked a whole lot faster. Third, we'll make sure our service pages and probably our portfolio pages as well meet intent better than the ranking competition. Fourth, we're going to gather customer questions that we could see prospective customers also asking and create content to answer those questions with the goal of capturing those searches. Ideally, these are going to be localized in some way if possible. And fifth, we'll use keyword and competitor research to come up with mid to high funnel content ideas that would make sense being localized to the Portland area. So again, number one there wouldn't be as important if we were a search or an experience service instead of a credence service. It also wouldn't really be as important if we're really early to market, like if we're a startup in a new field, the only company in the space or something like that. Then any of that stuff we do to stand out compared to the competition just wouldn't be quite as important right away as just getting our name and what we do out there. But that's not the case here. There's plenty of remodeling contractors, and we really need to convince people why we're better. And that's it. That's the outline of the strategy we'll follow. Now let's start planning some content. Okay, so the first thing we need to do at this point, at the point where we'll really start planning and creating content, is to identify content categories. Now, some of you may call these content types, and that's fine. When I say content categories, I don't mean like categories of a blog. I don't mean media types like images or video or whatever. Instead, when we're identifying content categories, what we're doing is identifying pieces of content that could be valuable and then we're grouping those items that are related in some way. If you've ever heard of an affinity map, if not, go research that in Google, but that's sort of what we're doing here. So in other words, we want to take all the information we have from our keyword tools, research on our competition, interviews with customers, as well as internal stakeholders, subject matter experts, and frontline people like customer support and so on. And we want to bring all that information together and start to group that information in some way, to organize it in some way. So we're essentially building a topic categorization schema here. And we'll come right back to this slide in just a second. But this is very similar to what we did looking at the keywords in our previous lessons that led us to creating these 4 personas or 4 types of people that we could see searching for keywords in our space. So we're just skimming all of our stuff, all of our research so far, and we're trying to group all that stuff in some way. And we're really looking for groupings that will eventually become one of these things. They might become pages, they might become sections on the site or groups of pages. They might become types of pages, so like service pages versus portfolio pages, or even blocks of content within pages. So for example, a block of testimonials on a services page. We're not really trying to decide where this stuff should go just yet. So you could call this affinity mapping, which is sort of a broad overview of what we're doing here. You can look up affinity mapping in Google for some further information on that. And again, at this stage, we're not really discriminating where the content category might go, whether it'll be a page or a section on the site or types of pages or blocks within pages. That doesn't really matter right now. Right now, we just want to start grouping stuff, and then we'll clean it up a bit later. All right, in this lesson, we're gonna think through our low funnel content categories. Now, I'm splitting this up to keep the lessons short, but in reality, you may not wanna split up this work by funnel stage. You may wanna do low, mid, high funnel all together. It's typically easier not to split that up. I'm creating this sort of arbitrary division here just to keep these lessons manageable. So first, remember, we're going low funnel here. So out of the 4 personas we identified that are searching in this space, we're really only thinking about our target customers right now. And since this is about our target customer, let's look at these target customer needs we identified in a previous lesson and see if we can pull out any content category ideas from this. So one really obvious one here is we want to answer these questions outlined in red, basically questions about what we do, what services we offer. And those are probably best answered using service pages. Basically, we need to make sure customers know what it is we do, what services we provide. So that's pretty simple. We already knew we'd need some sort of services pages, so nothing revolutionary here. But I'm also getting some ideas from these items outlined in blue here. So these are process related. In other words, they're related to our skill in managing the project and just doing good business in general. And so I could see 2 things helping sell that. I could see customer testimonials that are process focused helping to sell that. So if we had a customer say something like, wow, they totally cleaned up after themselves and my house was spotless after the project, that would be the type of testimonial I'm talking about here. And I could also see actual process information helping with that. So this could be a page on the site titled Our Process or something like that that talks about all the steps we take to ensure these things go smoothly. So I saw some marketing materials for a local roofing company, for example, that takes a metal detector and walks around the house to find any stray nails that fell off the roof, because that happens and then kids step on them. So that's obviously a big deal and something that really shows that company's thinking about these important details that their customers care about, but maybe didn't even think of themselves. And so publishing that kind of process-related information on a page would be a great addition to customer testimonials that backed up that same messaging. Okay, so outlined here in pink, are we experts? Do we have technical expertise? Now remember, because we're a credence service, that's going to be a little difficult to figure out for our customers. So testimonials are okay, but what we really want here are those prestige and authority signals we talked about in the SEC lesson. We talked about all these things in pink here, but I also added pictures of our fancy office, if we have one at the bottom there. If it's just really well designed and impressive looking, that will make a difference here for us. So if we have that, let's show it off. Then we have this stuff outlined in purple here, design and architectural chops. So they'll want to know if we do that stuff, if we actually offer design and architecture as a service. So our service pages will help with that. But I think the portfolio will help with that as well. Our target customer will definitely want to look at our past work. Okay, so I took our content categories and here they are listed so far. And now let's go look at our SEO strategy outline that we talked about previously. So are there any other content category ideas we can pull out of this? Well, yeah, definitely. We want to publicize the heck out of EAT, any EAT we have here from number one. Then we'll have this directory hacking page or pages if we do multiple. I'm not sure about that yet. We'll probably start with one out of the gate for now, but who knows? Finally, we have our service and portfolio pages. Okay, so here's that list of content categories so far on the right. And I think we can add that directory hacking strategy to the bottom here. And so up to this point, we've pulled out some content category ideas from two sources so far. Our 4 search audience personas, the 4 types of people we think are searching in this space. And then since this lesson is low funnel content only, we also looked at our target customer needs. Now let's jump over to our keyword tool and see what else we might be able to come up with. Okay, so I used the broad term remodeling as my seed keyword for this just because I want to go as broad as possible right now. One thing you want to keep in mind with these keyword tools is that you can go as broad or as narrow as you want, and that'll just restrict the scope of the ideas that this tool returns back to you. I typically start pretty broad, and keep in mind we really have only one primary service we're researching here. You may have more than that, and so you should repeat this for all those products or service lines. And you can also go into adjacent topic areas as well using concentric diversification like we talked about in a previous lesson. When you get to that point, you just start this over with those keywords or audiences or whatever it is. So for example, if we wanted to go really hard after interior design terms, then maybe we use interior design as our seed keyword up here at the top. Okay, so here's what Moz is giving us for remodeling. And basically, I'm just gonna skim through this list and I'm looking for any other content category ideas. And this is really similar to what we did with our 4 search personas as well as our customer needs list. We're just using those as seed lists to get some ideas. Same here, except we're using our keyword tool. And my guess is what we're gonna find here is that this list won't give us many more top level content categories, but it may help us refine or get more specific with some of the categories we already have. For the sake of not making you sit here and watch me do all this work, I'm gonna talk through a few of them here, and then I'm gonna fast forward to the end and talk through the final changes I made. Okay, so we're looking for low funnel ideas at this stage. And so first, I'm just gonna scan the list and see if there are any top level content categories that I haven't thought of yet. So right off the bat, I'm starting to get some ideas here and a feel for how people are searching. So we can see room types listed. So we see bathroom here, and we see kitchen here. These are definitely terms I could see our target audience searching later on in the research phases near the bottom of the funnel. They're a little higher up than, say, bathroom remodeling contractor or just remodeling contractor. Those would be much lower funnel keywords, but these are close enough that I'm gonna call them low funnel for now. I see bathroom remodeling ideas here. That's much more of a mid to high funnel search, most likely. So we'll ignore those for now. Okay, so I see this keyword here, blog cabin 2012 HGTV remodels. That's not really something we want to target, but the word cabin here does give me an idea. If this company's in Portland, I know Portland is a very outdoorsy place, so cabins may be a big thing. I could see people searching for experts in remodeling cabins or any type of building for that matter. Okay, so I'm gonna just start taking some notes here in my notepad. I've got room types, so bathroom, kitchen, for example. I've got building types, so I'm thinking cabin, single family, condos, things like that. Now, it is important at this stage to really think through, will my audience actually be searching this later in the buying process when they're ready to hire somebody? So in other words, would one of our customers actually be looking for a cabin remodeling contractor later on in the buying process? Really think through these. Again, we don't want to target keywords that aren't relevant. So really think through this and maybe even ask your customers or your internal subject matter experts if you have to. Maybe someone will know if customers get this specific in hiring somebody or not. I bet whoever answers the phone calls at our remodeling company, our receptionist or the primary salesperson or whatever, I bet they'd know the answer to this. But for our case, I'm gonna say yes, for remodeling services, particularly higher end jobs, I'd be blown away if people don't go searching for a company with specific expertise or experience in their project type. So that's building types, and we can flesh that out in a little more detail later if necessary. And this idea of getting more specific with service offerings actually sparked another idea for me as well. How about design styles? I could totally see somebody searching mid-century modern remodel or modern home remodel or, any other design style plus remodel. Particularly for the higher end jobs, those people probably want something that's true to that design style or at least sort of true to it. So they might actively seek out a company with expertise and experience in that style. Okay, so I'm gonna scan the rest of this list and see what else we can come up with. Okay, so here's what we added. Room type, we already talked about. Building type, we just talked about. Design styles, we just talked about. Type of work, I think we already talked about this, but people might search by the type of work they primarily need. So remodeling, renovation, restoration, interior design. I saw design build in there, which I'm pretty sure is relevant to us. I also saw some searches related to green or energy efficient. So I added that as an option as well. Finally, I revised my seed keyword list in Moz and searched remodeling companies instead of just remodeling. And I got these ideas as well. I saw people searching for reviews. And then I saw people searching by what I'm going to call project type, so commercial, residential, or industrial. Now, we already established that we only do residential, but maybe we'll want to move into commercial or industrial at some point in the future, or maybe we want to make connections with those companies that do those things. Maybe they can send us residential referrals. And so my thinking is, even if we don't do commercial or industrial, we could create a directory page for each of those and list all the companies in the area that do commercial and industrial remodeling and construction, and use that list as an excuse to call and introduce ourselves to those companies, get our foot in the door on building a relationship, and possibly getting some referrals out of that. Plus, hey, maybe we'll start doing commercial or industrial at some point in the future, and we'll have a head start in the rankings if we do this. Okay, so now that we have this list, and bear with me if you're not seeing quite where we're going with this just yet, just hang in there. So the next thing I want to do here is build this out a little bit. I really think this idea of people searching for specifically what their project is really has legs, especially if we're talking about higher end jobs. If I've got the money and I'm looking to remodel my house and I just really love like a modern style or something, but maybe I'm also in Portland and I really have this outdoor wilderness soul and I want that reflected in my house and I'm willing to spend whatever it takes to get that done, I could totally see that person searching something really hyper specific like rustic outdoor modern remodel or something like that. This might be more mid-funnel activity, but if we decide it is, we can just toss those content categories into the mid to high funnel discussion next. So I'm going to build this list out a little more specifically, do a little bit of research online so I can fill in some of these design styles, for example, because I'm not totally sure what all the design styles are, and see if there's anything else that pops up. Okay, so here's what I just did. I did a little Googling, looked through our competitor sites as well as some other remodeling sites I found online. And then I also reran this search in the Moz keyword tool with a few different seed keywords to help me get more detail on some of these items. And then I also found this list here at this link, which is a blog post listing all the top interior design styles. And I just pulled that entire list into my list of design styles here. And so you can see I built out project type at the top here. We already talked about that. Same with services. Then we've got rooms. I went and looked for and thought through all the different rooms that we might want to cover. I mostly just pulled those from competing remodeling sites or other remodeling sites that I found online. Same thing with building types. We already talked about green and energy efficient. We can delete this guy right here. And then we have our design styles. Okay, so let's add all these to our working content categories list. Here's the original list on the left. Then I cleaned it up a little bit on the right here, just grouped some items hierarchically so they're better organized and easier for me to scan through. And this is difficult when you're dealing with big lists of data or ideas. You know, as humans, our working memory is really fantastically small. And so if you have just a giant list of like 100 categories with no organization, it's just impossible to keep all that in mind so you can really see the high level overview. So I find it's really helpful to start organizing lists as soon as they get over 10 or so items. So now we have our cleaned up list here on the left. Then I'm just gonna drop these more detailed items here for now. This is our more detailed list that's almost too big for this slide. We can't really say this detailed list is really content categories necessarily. In reality, this is starting to look more like a detailed list of pages. And I actually went a little bit deeper on this and did some keyword research, but I wanted to do that because I thought it might help get some more content category ideas. And while I can't say that it gave me any top level content category ideas, it did give me something. It got me to start thinking about how exactly we're going to target all these possible detailed keywords in the simplest way possible. Like if we target all these keywords in this detailed list on the right here, we're talking about adding a lot of pages to the site if we had pages for every single one of those. Now we could do that. We could actually just figure out a way to use blog posts to target every single one of these and maybe just start our ongoing content creation there. But if we're thinking people are getting specific, I could also see somebody combining some of these searches into something like modern condo kitchen remodel. Okay, so wow, now this is starting to look pretty complex. We could end up with hundreds, possibly thousands of keyword combinations here. Are we really going to create pages for every single one? Let's talk about that in the next lesson. Let's pick up where we left off in the previous lesson. You've probably already noticed by now, so this kind of goes without saying, but notice that many of these lessons aren't really natural breakpoints in this work, in this content planning work. I'm just trying to keep them as short as possible for obvious reasons. In practice, a lot of this stuff blurs together. We often finish a lot of this stuff and then stumble upon something that we missed and go back and update everything. And that's actually a big mistake I see a lot of companies make, is they try to treat this like an assembly line process. And then when you get to the end, you're just totally done. It's not like that at all. You can iterate on this endlessly as long as you're seeing results. And it's almost guaranteed that you'll get to some point, then find some amazing insight that you didn't even think of before, and then want to go back and update things. So I really encourage you to try to keep this fluid as much as possible. Go where this research leads you. This is obviously a little tougher if you're an agency and you need to have defined deliverables and scope and all that. But for all you in-house teams, treat this as an iterative work in progress until you reach a point of diminishing returns. Okay, so that out of the way, let's pick up where we left off in the previous lesson. We had all these content categories we identified. Then we did a little keyword research and came up with this more detailed list of topics on the right here that you could sort of call content categories, but they're more like detailed notes on what some of our content categories might contain. And we left off trying to figure out what to do with that big list, because we realized that this isn't all there is. You could combine room types and building types, or design styles and building types, or room types and design styles to create what could potentially be some kind of giant unwieldy site structure. So we left off trying to figure out, how do we target all of those combinations of terms, because we think people might actually search for that stuff. Well, I think we could target the services using our service pages. That's pretty simple. I think we can also target the project type with our service pages, particularly because we only do residential, but we'll probably also create those directory pages as well. So how about rooms? Room types like kitchens, basements, bathrooms. Well, I think we could do service pages for those as well. So we could have, for example, a remodeling services page and then an interior design services page from under the services section here. But then we could also have major rooms under services as well. So like a bathroom remodeling page and a kitchen remodeling page. But even better than that, rooms could be categories within the services section, or we could put them in the portfolio section and they could be like categories within the portfolio section. So here's a sitemap showing what that might look like if we made them subpages within the services section. So here we have the main services page, and then below that in the structure, we have the service pages for each specific room, talking about unique considerations and our experience with that type of room, and maybe including some testimonials from past clients, links to related industry publications or press, and maybe even linking to our portfolio projects for that room type if we do end up sorting those by room as well. And if we target those room keywords in the portfolio section, this is what they might look like. So we have the portfolio main page up here at the top. Then below that is a page for each major portfolio section divided by room type. And then finally down here at the bottom, we have the individual project pages. So these are the individual portfolio pages talking about a single project. And finally, a third option might be just to keep the services and portfolio sections as simple as possible and just go after these more specific terms with blog posts. And so that might look like this, with the blog main page here at the top. And here we're basically using the same structure as we were in the previous slide showing the portfolio structure if we went that approach, but we're just housing everything in the blog. And then we're using the typical blog category structure and post structure to house and organize this content. But overall, the structure is the same as if we did this in the portfolio. But I think I actually like the idea of housing this content in the portfolio section the best. And there are a few reasons for this. First, it just feels right. If we're talking about a kitchen remodel, it just feels like it makes more sense for the primary focus of that page to be examples of awesome kitchens that we've done, instead of like some intro services copy on kitchen remodeling that might just end up being sort of fluffy content anyway if we put this in the services section. Because in reality, I think most people probably just want to see our work samples. And the other benefit of throwing it in the portfolio is that we can build this out as deep as we want and have as many pages as we want. Okay, so back to this list here that we were looking at earlier. So we're gonna hit the services in the services section, obviously. Then we're gonna hit project type, I think also under the services section. We can also cover project type under our directory pages. So for example, we could have a directory page of residential remodeling contractors and commercial remodeling contractors. And then we could cover every single one of these other pieces in the portfolio. And that would make that portfolio section incredibly flexible to allow us to target pretty much any keyword or combination of keywords related to the project, and to put what we think is largely the primary content for either mid or higher funnel searches related to these topics front and center. That is the actual work itself. So I really like this idea. I think it's a good approach. It's simple, it's clean, it makes sense. I believe it'll hit our most important components of intent the best as well. Obviously, if that changes with later research, we'll have to revise this a bit, but I don't think it will. And so assuming we've done a good number of projects already, I mean, we are mid-market in this space, so that should be the case, and we have the content to do this, this portfolio structure shown on the right here is gonna let us target all kinds of crazy keyword combinations. I mean, we could put in the tiny house we remodeled in a minimalist style in the forests outside of Portland, and we could literally target a super long tail keyword like Portland tiny house remodel Mount Hood forest on a portfolio page talking about that project, and just include all those words and target a really granular search like that. So if somebody saw that house like out in the wild, or if they actually have a similar project, they might also search that specifically or something like that. So I could totally see that happening in this space, and I think this structure will give us the flexibility to cover that. All right, so now here is our list of content categories with a few notes added around what goes where in blue. So we'll target residential remodeling in the services section. We'll also have our main services pages. So we'll have a page for remodeling, another for interior design, another for architecture, another for general contractor, and so on. Then our portfolio will be divided by room and building type and green or energy efficient, and then also by design styles. So we can use what's called a faceted navigation here, where you can check multiple categories or multiple tags, if you want to call them that. And we'll just tag each of our projects with all of those categories or tags, those descriptors that apply to that given project. And then our process page lives on its own, but we'll want to add links to this page wherever relevant. So if someone's on our services page for, say, remodeling, there's a link on that page pointing to the process page in case they're interested in getting that information at that point. Directory pages will live on the blog, and we'll start with these three for Portland remodelers, Portland commercial remodelers, and Portland industrial remodelers / construction, just to cover that commercial and industrial piece in case we want to build relationships in those spaces, or if we end up going into those spaces in the future. I moved EAT over here to the right to give us a little more space on this slide, but we'll show testimonials everywhere, and particularly wherever relevant. So if we can put testimonials on the service or portfolio pages that they're relevant to, that would be ideal, but certainly not a requirement. We'll create an awards and press page that we'll use to house all of our press and TV appearances, awards we've won, and any expert third-party reviews and ratings we have. I think we can talk about the authority positions we hold within the About Us page. And then we can also house our fancy office pics on that page as well. We could also add those around the site wherever it makes sense to. You know, like shots of us working or having meetings or whatever, instead of the dreaded stock photos that you typically see used everywhere. And so here's a preliminary sitemap. It's pretty big, so I collapsed the portfolio pages and the service pages and blog posts. You can see those represented here with the stacked boxes. This means there will be multiple pages there. And I'll build out the entire sitemap with all the detail, put it into a PDF in the next lesson so that you can download that and have that for reference. And that's it for content planning. Fairly simple once you get the hang of it. The only thing that might change some of this is when we start the deeper keyword and intent research at the page level, we might find some of our assumptions here were incorrect. Like we made a lot of assumptions about intent and things like that. And that's okay. If that happens on your project, no worries. That's very common. Just come back to this and revise it with that updated info. In this lesson, we're going to think through our customer journey a bit to figure out what they might be searching all along the funnel, and that'll help us come up with mid to high funnel content. So what we're doing here is starting with our customer on the far left here, and then our goal on the far right. In our case, that's generating leads, submitting a contact form, or calling us. And we just want to tie these two together by identifying all the things the customer might be looking for along this process as they get closer to completing the action we want them to complete, in our case, becoming a lead. Another way to look look at this as a funnel. So here's the typical AIDA funnel, so named because of its steps: awareness at the top, then interest, then desire, then action. But I'm not really a big fan of this model for SEO. I think Avinash Kaushik's See, Think, Do, Care model, while similar to the AIDA model, is better for our purposes. It's just slightly different, but it's a little easier to think about in terms of SEO. See at the top is the largest addressable qualified audience, but not necessarily expressing intent to buy. This is where our dreamers and our pros and our DIYers live largely, but also our customer before they've expressed commercial intent. These people are searching things like HGTV remodels and other terms that are only sort of related to what we do. The next stage, Think, is the largest addressable qualified audience with some commercial intent. That means we could see these people buying in the future. Not all of them, not most of them in fact, but some of them. And these people are searching things like kitchen remodel ideas, or maybe even just kitchen remodel. The next stage is Do, and this is the largest addressable qualified audience with loads of commercial intent. That means these people are very likely going to pull the trigger and hire someone at some point soon, and they're searching things like Portland remodeling contractors. Finally, we have Care. That's for existing customers. We will address that with our customer questions content to an extent, but since our primary goal right now is lead gen and we're just starting out, and this course is about SEO and not customer loyalty or referral marketing, we'll focus on acquiring new customers rather than helping existing ones. Even so, it's still an important stage in the funnel. Okay, so I've mapped what I think are pretty common questions along the funnel here. You can see they start in See, just thinking it would be cool. In Think, they're seriously starting to consider remodeling. And in Do, they're pretty sure they're moving forward. And you can see how the questions change, how their information needs change. And this is where you'd want to pull in real research. So getting this right can save you a lot of time creating content that doesn't drive any real business results. So it's tempting to skip that real customer research, but I don't recommend it. And you can just start by tackling little pieces at a time. Get to know one customer segment for one goal and work on building a journey from that, and then tackle another customer segment with the same goal or another goal. Okay, so at the top, at C, well, we're just ignoring C for now, so let's cross that out. That's too high funnel for us. We're going mid-funnel at most here. So next is Think, and I think in this space, and it'll be different for different verticals and even different companies within a given vertical, but for us, these people are exploring ideas. That means finding out what things typically cost, whether they can afford it, figuring out what they want to do, whether it'll increase their home's value, things like that. There's probably some dreaming going on here too, poking around, sort of aimlessly looking at photos, but more focused on really cool stuff and maybe not necessarily stuff they're actually going to do just yet. And then we get to Do. And at this point, they're pretty sure they're hiring someone, so now they start getting more focused. They start figuring out what design styles they like, researching companies to find out who to hire, looking into specifics like colors and patterns and things like that. And so here are those same funnel stages with some possible search queries added. And keep in mind, there's always some overlap, always a lot of flex. It's hard to know exactly where a given keyword falls on the funnel. We can't know for sure just based on the search query alone. So there's some error margin here that we just have to deal with, but we'll try to get it as close as we can. So for example, someone might search modern versus rustic versus traditional to compare those design styles really early on. Even though I have that search query listed under Do here, we could totally see somebody searching that really early in their process. But we want to map these out just to get a rough idea and start to get a feel for where we think some of these keywords are. So take this search query up here in the C stage, kitchen remodel. That term could really be anywhere in the funnel, but if we add Portland to that, now that is very likely someone looking to hire a company, right? Or possibly looking for examples of remodels in Portland, like to browse through portfolios. It may not be down here in Do just yet, but it's definitely further down than that C stage at the very top, just because we've added the city. And this is pretty common. Slight modifiers can really change the intent and funnel position of a keyword. To use a really simple example, teeth whitening, that keyword may have very different intent than Cincinnati teeth whitening. The first may be much more informational. The second is almost certainly looking for a dentist to do teeth whitening in Cincinnati. And incidentally, this is where paid search can actually be a goldmine of information. You can run paid search on the keywords you're thinking about targeting to test where in the funnel the bulk of the intent is for that search term. It's a good way to get a read on some of this stuff that you may not have a clear answer to before you commit the resources to going after a bunch of keywords in organic search that may or may not drive business results. Okay, so now that we have a rough idea of what our customer wants up and down the funnel, and we've already done the low funnel content planning, let's figure out what our mid to high funnel content is going to look like. So we referenced this a little bit in our SEO strategy lesson, and we said that we do customer questions and localizable mid to high funnel content. So let's talk about how to plan that content. This process is not complex, and I'm not going to bore you by rehashing how to use our keyword tools or having you watch me do this, but here's a quick overview of what I'm going to do. So there are a few ways to tackle this, and they're all valid. You might do all these things on a project, and I'd recommend at some point you do, but you can start with just one or two. So first is just to think through each funnel stage and just think about what a prospective customer might search during that phase. And we did that a bit in the previous lesson with this see, think, do, care funnel and the questions we could see customers asking in each stage. So that's one source of data, okay? In this case, our mapping of the customer journey through the funnel and our brains to figure out the keywords. And you can get really far just doing that. Now we can also use our keyword tool Moz, or your keyword tool of choice, and plug in a variety of seed keywords and then scan those lists like we did in the previous lessons. But this time we'll be looking for topic ideas, mostly in the think stage of the see, think, do funnel. And so number 2 is really only different from number 1 in that we're using the keyword tool to help jumpstart the ideation process. Remember, we decided we don't want to compete with those national brands. We saw ranking for a lot of the mid-funnel terms, so we're looking for localizable content, if at all possible. Next, we'll use a cool little function in Moz that will show us only questions. And you can see that option here in this dropdown. The default option is include a mix of sources, and we'll just change that to our questions to get a list of questions related to your seed keyword. And you could also use keywordtool.io or your keyword tool of choice at this stage as well. And again, you can plug in a few different seed keywords here and get different results. Now this is how we're going to pull question ideas for this project because we don't have any actual customers or colleagues we can tap for that information. And that's fine if you need to do that. But a much better source for this would be number 4 here, your customers and colleagues who can give you actual questions and actual customer needs and just give you a much more accurate picture of how your prospective customers are searching than if you were to just guess. Finally, you can check out your competition and see what they're doing. Although be careful, as we'll see in a little bit, most of your competition may not know this stuff you're learning in this course. Major brands get this stuff wrong all the time, even though they have tons of money to spend. And we'll show you a little of that later, but just use competitors as a source of ideas. Don't copy what they're doing, because they might not be doing everything right at all. And we're choosing quality over quantity here. We're not trying to write a blog post for every keyword we can think of. We're trying to accurately identify what our target customer might be searching early on in the buying process, marry that up with our ability to rank for those keywords, and then use that to make a decision on what to publish. And this often means less but better content and a much more focused strategy. Okay, so we're back at Moz, and I've just plugged in the broad term remodeling to start with again. And what we're looking for here are keywords that represent different active intent, specifically mid-funnel intent. And we'll just scan the list and really quickly write down what we find. So I'll do a few of these for you to show you how to start, and then I'll fast forward to the end and explain what I came up with. Okay, so we have remodeling plus room. So you can see remodeling kitchen, remodeling bathroom here. And we had that for our low funnel content, but I think there's some overlap here with mid funnel. So we'll add that and talk about that a little bit more later. And we also have to think about buildings and design styles as well. And then I'm seeing ideas. So we have remodeling ideas. And then we'll have rooms, buildings, and design styles for that as well. So you could picture somebody searching mid-century modern remodeling ideas or kitchen remodeling ideas. So that's the room and ideas here. I see remodeling cost here, so we'll add that. Now let's think through, do we want rooms, buildings, and design styles on this one? Rooms, definitely I could see somebody searching kitchen remodeling cost for sure. What about buildings, like condo remodeling cost or single family residential remodeling cost or log cabin remodeling cost? I don't see people doing the same thing with buildings. I'm not sure I see somebody searching condo remodeling cost. Maybe, but it's pretty broad and unfocused. So I'm going to say no. And then the same with design styles. I just think it's too broad. I can't see somebody searching modern design remodeling cost or mid-century modern remodeling cost. Why would somebody search that? It's too broad to really be meaningful. They're going to get more specific with like a room type. I think that's the only one that makes sense, is specifying the room plus cost. Now we could try to add these as low priority keywords to go after later for maybe the next iteration through this work, but I'm going to leave these out to keep things simple. So I see software here, but I'm not sure I see our customer searching that. Tips, possibly. That's a maybe. Let me add that and think about that one. Here's one, resources. I don't think so. It's certainly possible, but I see that being mostly pros and DIYers more than our target customer. Okay, so let's fast forward here and I'll build the rest of this list out and then we can talk about what I did after that. Okay, so here is the complete list. So remodeling in rooms is kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, for example. Remodeling in buildings is condo remodeling. We talked about those, and we're actually targeting those with our low funnel content, but we think there's some overlap with mid funnel on those keywords, so we want to think about those here as well. Ideas or inspiration we already talked about. This one here, I thought about people walking by a remodeling project and searching something like, who's doing the 37th and Race Portland remodel? To find the company doing the project they walked by or something like that. And we could have content for that. Even if it wasn't us doing it, that might work. It might be worth testing. That super specific stuff can sometimes drive a pretty high return, but we're probably pushing it there. So I'd test that idea first, and it probably wouldn't be a really high priority. Then we have hiring and jobs. So if we're hiring, it wouldn't be a bad idea to consider targeting remodeling jobs, but that's really a different goal. It's a different customer, if you want to call it that. So we'd plan that out separately for that audience. Tips and trends are pretty straightforward. And then I grouped all these under resources here. So there are events like home shows or trade shows. I have GTD, which is getting things done. And this is just a place I dropped a few ideas I had about local laws and processes. So for example, links to Portland zoning laws and links to inspection standards in Portland and things like that. This is really mostly people doing remodeling, so pros or DIYers, and so we'll probably remove it, but maybe there's something we could pull out of it. City resources here, I found a green home remodeling guide on the City of Portland website. There may be other things like that that may actually fit our target customer, so I want to think about those a little bit. Information about different styles, so like what is modern design versus mid-century modern versus traditional. I could see our customers looking for help in choosing the style they like the best as sort of an initial direction. We have tools and services. Our customers probably wouldn't want these, but I'll think about it more and maybe decide on that one later. Product info. So this is just general info about doors and windows and countertops and all that. Maybe help choosing them or something like that. It's a pretty big category though, so I'm not sure we would want to go after that, and I don't think it's localizable either. So then we have DIYer resources, and this is similar to the GTD section above, but it's focused on DIYers. Now, I was thinking maybe there's a case to be made that some DIYers might hire us to do most of the project and then do the rest themselves. I doubt that, but it's here in case it sparks any ideas later. Then we have cost or price, and that's a pretty big one, I think. And so I could see people searching kitchen remodeling cost or bathroom remodeling cost. I'm not sure I can see people searching condo remodeling cost or even mid-century modern remodeling cost. Like design styles or building types. I don't see those being searched in combination with the word cost or price. But another one I just thought of is how to save money. So we'll put that one under cost as well. I'm not sure about that one, but I saw some searches related to it. And then we have before and afters. So this is likely looking for before and after photos. So our project portfolio would probably cover that, but maybe we want to consider a way to work in actual before and afters into that portfolio if people are actually looking for that. And in fact, there's almost no question that would be a good idea, not even for SEO, just to help prospective customers really visualize how much more awesome their dreary space could be with our help. I think showing what the spaces looked like before we touched them and then after the project was done could really help customers visualize that. Now, there's some other stuff out there. We could go a little deeper on this, but I think this is plenty to start with, and you can always revisit this work later to get more ideas. Okay, so now we pretty much just have this giant list of topics, and before we think about funnel position for these, I want to think about which of these topics might be localizable. A lot of this is definitely not. Purely from a content planning perspective, national SEO is a little bit easier. Not to rank, but to plan that content. You don't have to take this next step of figuring out what you can localize. But being a local company really restricts what we can do effectively because a lot of what our prospective customers might search in our space are keywords that don't have local intent. In other words, if someone wants to learn the difference between modern and minimalist interior design styles, they probably don't care if the site is local or national. And so we could go after those national terms, but then we're competing in the big leagues, and we have some significant disadvantages there. Plus, even if we did rank, most of the people searching those terms are outside of our service area anyway. Okay, so because we're a local company, we now have to get rid of the topics that we found that are not localizable in some way. Okay, so here's our original list. And here I went ahead and crossed out everything that I didn't think was either not a fit for our customer. In other words, it was a keyword somebody like a DIYer might search, but not something our customer might search. And then I also crossed out anything that wasn't localizable. So let's talk through these. So we have the low funnel stuff at the top here that we also think there might be some mid to high funnel intent overlap as well. Ideas I really don't think is localizable. I just don't see people searching something like Portland kitchen remodel ideas. Okay, I'm also skipping this who's doing specific projects idea as well. Maybe something to test, but I really doubt that's going to be effective now that I've thought about it a little more. Cost and price, we want to keep these for sure, but I would be specific. So not remodeling cost, but something like Portland bathroom remodeling cost. I could see that being searched. So the room or something would have to be attached to it. Hiring and jobs are definitely keywords that are worth considering, but I've crossed that off here because it's really an entirely different target audience with a different goal and all that. And so we'd want to think about that separately outside the scope of this course. I do think tips could be localizable. I could see us doing maybe just one article titled Top 30 Portland Remodeling Tips for 2019 or something like that, and it would be specific to Portland, of course. We could also consider room types like Portland bathroom remodeling tips, but I'm not sure about that one. I almost see somebody searching that, if they did at all, looking more for trends than just tips, right? I could see people searching trends, which is why I have that here, and I think that's localizable. I could see people searching that related to a city, so trends for remodeling in Portland, but I'm on the fence about tips. So related to trends, I do think it could be localizable. I think our target customer could search that. We could start broad with Portland remodeling trends and maybe get more focused with rooms and maybe design styles and that sort of thing. Before and after. So we could potentially localize that. I think that would be doable. I could see someone searching for before and afters in Portland specifically, but we might just try to work that into our portfolio because that's really where the intent would fit. A before and after is really just a project photo, right? We just have to make sure we got before shots also. And then I think a lot of this stuff on the right here under resources could potentially be localizable. However, most of it is probably not something that our target customer might search. This content would be better for DIYers or pros, just not our target customer. So product info, maybe we can see that one in here, but I really just can't see us building some kind of library on like every type of window, door, carpet, flooring, and so on. I just don't see that returning enough. So I've excluded everything under resources here. Okay, so we have really narrowed down our topics, and this is all we have left that our target customer might search and could be localizable. This is it. But here's the thing. We already planned for these up here with the low funnel content we talked about earlier. These would be terms like Portland kitchen remodel or Portland tiny house remodel, and we decided to target those terms with our portfolio. And so the question we need to ask is, if this were also a mid to high funnel search, if that person were a mid to high funnel, would the intent be the same? Would a person searching Portland kitchen remodel early in the buying process still want to see a portfolio like we think they want to do later in the buying process? And I think the answer to that is yes. If you consider someone mid to high funnel searching Portland kitchen remodel, if they're looking for ideas or inspiration and they're eventually going to hire somebody to help, in other words, they're in our target customer segment, then I think they're primarily looking for pictures and information about projects. But I also stumbled upon something else. I found this site. Now, this is Emily Henderson. She's an interior designer and TV host in LA, I believe. And if you check out her portfolio and we click into one of these, so look at this. She's basically using her blog to house her project portfolio, and all her portfolio pages are more like case studies, basically, or blog posts describing the decisions they made and materials and all that, but also with really killer photos of all the work they did. And when I was looking at her site, it dawned on me that this is actually a better approach than just having project photos. I really like this approach of showing killer photos, those are important, but also explaining the choices we made and the process and all that. I think prospective customers would love that at any stage in the funnel. Now, we don't have to do this with every project. Obviously, this is a lot of work, but maybe add 5 to 10 portfolio projects like this to cover our major room types and design styles, and then have the rest of our project portfolio be strictly images. And then if we wanted to do this other mid to high funnel content we talked about, then that's great. But I'd actually demote all that below building a case study or project story for as many portfolio projects as possible. And here's why. Think about our low funnel needs that we defined in an earlier lesson, right? Remember these customer needs? This is the needs that our customer has when they're low in the funnel. So yeah, we're building out service pages for this and all that. But nearly all this stuff could be communicated with a really robust portfolio. And that's it. If that's all we had, we could communicate almost all this stuff with just that. Even the stuff that's not really answered directly is sort of implied, at least a little bit, just by virtue of having a rocking portfolio that's just way better than our competition. But the same goes for our original mid to high funnel topics as well. Ideas? These people just want to see pictures and probably some explanation to get ideas. But then, if you think about our other 4 search audience personas, they all have major overlap with that intent as well. So yeah, some are looking for tools or resources and all that, but I think most of the time, these 4 personas, when they're going to Google and searching almost anything, most of that searching is going to be to get ideas and understanding of different design styles and how things fit together and different materials and all that. And if you think about that intent, almost all of that can be met using a rockin' portfolio with really good descriptions, combined with great information about the project. So we could spend time on all this other content, or we could spend all our time building a killer portfolio with case studies or project stories or whatever we want to call them, and we'd be able to focus our efforts on the one thing that would help drive results up and down the funnel and even get some love from our other search personas, and that's going to help us rank better as well. And so for that reason, I'm going to show you how to finalize some of the work on this other content, but after doing the research on this project, I can tell you 100% if I were this remodeling company, I would focus all my ongoing content efforts on building the most amazing portfolio anybody in this space has ever seen and making sure it got found and shared on social media and all that. And I would totally ignore every other content approach. So if this were for a client of ours, we'd tell them that we'd go back and we'd revise our strategy that we came up with before. But for the purpose of this course and for learning everything we can to be effective with SEO, I also want to show you how we would put a bow on those other pieces of content. So we're still going to do that. All right, so with that out of the way, our next step is to build out our sitemap, assuming we were going to create some of this other mid-funnel content. So let's jump to that in the next lesson. Okay, so in the last lesson, we took that big list of mid to high funnel intent topics. And remember, you can think of those as high-level active intent topics. Some people might just call those topics. Others might just say we were putting together a rough list of ideas for mid to high funnel pages. And those would all be fine. So what we did is we took that big list and we removed everything that we didn't think either fit our customer persona or was localizable in some way. And we ended up narrowing that down to a relatively small list because we saw that in this space, a lot of the searchers are likely non-customers. So the DIYers, the dreamers, and the pros. And we decided we don't want to create content for those people at this stage. And then because this is a local business, we removed any topics we didn't think were localizable. And to recap what I mean by localizable, I just mean if we could see someone searching a local version of that search query. So for example, we could see someone in Portland wanting to know kitchen remodel costs in the Portland area, searching kitchen remodel cost Portland. So that keyword is localizable, whereas we can't really see someone searching remodeling ideas Portland. Maybe, like I said before, I'm sure there's some of that, but not much. And remember, this step of localizing our content, that's only necessary because we're a local business. If we were national, we would not have to go through that. Although we could go after local terms if we were national. You definitely see that. It's not a bad strategy in some cases. This is really common with franchise systems where you have a national franchise, but then you also have individual local franchisees. But for us, we're in Portland only. And so on top of cutting that list down to size, we decided that most of the mid to high funnel stuff yeah, we could see people searching it and maybe it'll drive some business. But if this were a real project, a real client of ours, we'd advise them to focus all their efforts on the portfolio because that is where they'll have the biggest impact. But this isn't a real project. It's just for learning. It's for instruction. So we don't have to abide by the rules of logic and rationality. We can do whatever we want to do. And so we are going to plan this content, even though I would not do it in real life. So let's talk through the changes I made to our sitemap with this new mid to high funnel content. Okay, so here's our sitemap. You'll notice there's some new stuff here, particularly some information on the faceted nav, which we'll talk through down here, and then some extra pages in blue that I've added here that we'll talk through now. So I built out this portfolio section a little bit. You can see we have the portfolio index page, which is the main portfolio page that you would get to by clicking portfolio in the nav or our projects or whatever we want to call it. Then you would come to a page that lists all of our portfolio projects, but then you could filter by project type. So you can see I've got kitchen projects, bathroom projects, basement projects, additions, bedrooms, whole house, etc. We would keep going. These are all room types. But we would use a navigation like this, which is called a faceted navigation, to basically allow you to check multiple options. So you could filter down to kitchens only, or you could do multiple of these. So you can see here I have kitchens and bedrooms checked. And then under design styles, I also have traditional and minimalist checked. So what we're doing here is we're telling the website, hey website, show me all the kitchen and bedroom portfolio projects. Kitchens and bedrooms are checked in the traditional or minimalist style, because those two are checked, for any building type, because no building type is checked, so it'll show all of them. So if you're not familiar with faceted navigation, you can look that up and research it a little bit more, but no question you've run across it on other sites before. So that's what we would use here. Portfolio index would show all portfolio projects, then you could filter down. So if you check kitchen projects only, you'd end up here, and you'd have all of the kitchen projects listed on that page. If you check bathroom projects only, you'd end up here and have all the bathroom projects listed. If you checked kitchen and bathroom projects, then you would have all the kitchen and all the bathroom projects. Okay? Makes sense. I'm not going to go too much more into detail on faceted nav, so if there's still some confusion on that, look that up. But you can see what I've added here in blue. These are the individual project pages. So we would have a page under kitchen, for example, and it would target a term similar to Portland downtown loft kitchen remodel. So this would be a project that we did in downtown Portland. Presumably it's a loft. And so we'd be targeting a keyword something like this. And this would just be an explanation of the project along with a bunch of killer photos, just like we saw on Emily Henderson's site. And we do as many of these as possible. You can see I have Portland Bohemian bathroom remodel. We have Portland traditional kitchen remodel. We can get as specific or as general as we want. That's the benefit to this strategy. You know, this page might target Portland bathroom remodel, whereas this page might target Portland high-end bathroom remodel with soaking tub, right? Very, very specific. And you can take a look and see all the other example portfolio projects I added here. And to reiterate, we'd probably start with the shorter keywords, the higher traffic keywords. So for example, Portland kitchen remodel, and we'd create a portfolio project with a lot of detail and a lot of images for that. And then we'd work our way down to more and more specific keywords. And then we'd only do that as long as we needed to. Most of our portfolio projects could be images only, especially when you're talking about these really long specific keywords. These are going to be much, much easier to rank for. We might not even need any text content. And then some of the more important ones, we would add text explaining the project and the design decisions and styles and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the portfolio. Let's jump over to the blog. So you can see I've made a few changes here. I made a directories category under the blog. And then we have those directory pages we talked about. We would have Portland remodelers, and that would list remodeling companies in Portland. And then we'd have commercial remodelers. And then we'd have another page for industrial remodelers. I don't know what they call that. It's probably industrial construction or something like that. But hopefully you get the point there. Those would be the directory pages. And then you can see if we wanted to go after tips. Remember, I said I'd focus on the portfolio as the number one area of focus for SEO. But if we wanted to go after tips, I have a tips category under the blog. And then you could see we'd create a blog post, for example, called Portland Kitchen Remodeling Tips, and talk about remodeling tips for Portland kitchens. Same thing with bathroom remodeling tips. We could put all of the tips blog posts under that category. Then we have costs. So we could cover kitchen costs, bathroom costs for Portland in particular under the cost category. Same with trends. So trends, and then we have Portland kitchen trends, Portland bathroom trends, and so on. And again, I would do the directories for sure because that's a low funnel strategy. And if you remember, we want to start low funnel and work our way up. So the directories for sure, that's low funnel. But these mid to high funnel blog post categories, I would not do in real life unless I had already built out a really awesome, robust portfolio. Okay, that's our sitemap. And so I'm recommending we do the portfolio primarily or exclusively for this local project. But there's one exception to that, and that is if we wanted to become nationally known. If we actually became nationally known, maybe we had a TV show, maybe our website was really epic and we wanted to start serving clients from all over the country, then it might make sense to do some of this more general mid to high funnel content. It might be cost effective then because we're dramatically expanding the size of the audience that would also be prospective customers. But that just wouldn't work for a local company generating leads. The cost would be just too high. And you actually see this mistake a lot, even in our Portland remodeling space. Nearly every competitor in our space is publishing stuff that just won't drive any leads via SEO. Really, they probably won't drive many leads via other channels either. And that's because they don't have a captive audience already. These sites are not newspapers or magazines or large organizations with an audience regularly checking in at the site or landing there via email. These are local remodeling companies. And so by publishing this kind of general content, they're basically trying to become a media company. They're trying to follow the media company strategy of building a regular readership. And even media companies are having a heck of a hard time with that these days. So I don't recommend a local company follow this strategy. And so that's why taking the time to develop a clear picture of your customer journey and understanding the channel you're using for distribution of your content and doing this kind of research we've covered in this course is so important. A really easy question these guys could all ask themselves is this: are we doing anything here that is significantly better or more relevant or different? Or do we have significantly more EAT or brand awareness than the sites that are already ranking for some of these search terms that we're writing blog posts on? A good content strategy for search will be able to answer yes to those questions. And one last takeaway here, people often go for quantity over quality, and sometimes that works, but more often than not, you'll be better off identifying the content your audience really wants and really going deep with that content. Hence my recommendation that we focus our entire effort on the portfolio and just make that as epic as possible. And you actually see Emily Henderson doing just that, that site we looked at earlier. In fact, she doesn't even have a services page at all. Her site is largely just a blog with categories to help organize blog posts and the portfolio projects. So does that work? Well, this is her estimated search traffic each month, almost 90,000 visitors a month. Compare that to our largest competitor in Portland, Hammer in Hand, with offices in Seattle and Portland. They're only driving an estimated 5,700 visits a month from search. Now, of course, Emily has a TV show, so brand awareness is likely off the charts compared with Hammer in Hand. But the point is, if you focus on doing the few things that will move the needle the most and doing those things really, really well, you'll get much better results in search. Wow, so we are almost done with this chapter. The last thing we need to do is deeper intent and keyword research at the page level. So up to now, what we've done is look at intent and the competition from a really high level, but ultimately the individual pages on our site are what we care about. Those individual pages are what show up in the search results, so we need to look at intent at the page level. So for this example, I picked one of those mid to high funnel terms we just decided not to target. You know, those non-localized keywords where we'd be competing against those big national brands like Lowe's and Martha Stewart and Home Depot and sites like that. The keyword I chose is kitchen remodel ideas. So it's not localized. This is a national term that will likely have some pretty big competition. I would not recommend a local remodeling company go after this term. As we discussed in those mid to high funnel lessons, there's just too much competition and the audience overlap with our target customer is tiny. But I picked this keyword because we'll be able to talk through most of the stuff we've covered so far in this course with just a single piece of content. And that's because if we did go after this keyword as a local company, we'd be competing for a national search term or a non-localized search term against these huge brands. And that means we'd have to really think about intent and competition and EAT and brand awareness and everything. And it's likely our content will have to be just a really good match for intent if we were to even have a chance. And so we can talk through what that looks like. And understanding how to think about a hyper-competitive situation like this, you'll have the tools to handle those much less competitive situations you're probably going to run into on a regular basis. So the first thing we need to do is just think through intent a little bit. I typically start this just thinking on my own about the 5 W's. So I think about what the user searched, but also what they didn't search, because that can often be even more telling than what they did search. And while I'm doing that, I might go search Google for the keyword to see what's ranking, like what intent appears to be covered by the pages that are already ranking for this keyword. And I'll go back and forth between my own notes and brainstorming and Google, and I might even pull in a keyword tool at this point to help me get even more ideas. But the first place we start is just thinking through intent a little bit. And so for this keyword, the intent, at least from a somewhat high level, is to get ideas for a kitchen remodel. Pretty simple, right? But what did this person not search? What are they not including in the search query? Well, they didn't specify what kinds of ideas, right? Ideas by itself is pretty broad. So think about it. What kind of ideas is this person looking for? Colors, design styles, ideas to save money, ideas for small spaces, ideas for a modern remodel or a traditional style remodel. Really quickly, we get into this really rather simple question, which is, what is an idea? Like, what kind of content represents an idea to this person? Are they looking for quick tips or examples of decoration and art? Or are they looking for actual products? Are they looking for design style ideas in the form of pictures? There's just so much intent hidden in that word ideas. And that's because it's a fairly broad term. People tend to get more specific as they progress down the funnel because they're learning more about the space. And so this broad term ideas suggests these users are probably fairly early on in the process. And that answers our win from the 5 W's. They're mid to high funnel. They're fairly early on in the buying process. And so we know it's broad. And so the first thing that pops into my mind as I'm thinking about this keyword is, what are the next steps this person might want to take after they search, and how do we ensure that our content helps them with that step? So the best option is probably to give them some options to help narrow their search or to drill down into more specific information. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. So we have our when. Let's run through the rest of the 5 W's real quick on this term. So for the who, we could use our audience segments here. Remember the people searching mid to high funnel terms, the dreamers, DIYers, pros, and customers. And you could get more specific with this if we needed to. We could drill down into demographics and go as far as building out like a detailed persona for each of these segments of searchers if we wanted to. And that might be fine for a later iteration on this content, or if your competition was just crazy stiff and you had to eke out every advantage you could. So there's a lot more we could put in here under the who if we thought it would be valuable. But I think these 4 segments of searchers are going to do fine for right now. So now the what. Well, we know what they searched. They searched kitchen remodel ideas. So that one's simple. What about the where? I don't know. They could be anywhere, right? I mean, they're probably not driving around in their car, but they're also not necessarily in Portland, which is why we chose not to go after these broader national terms in our SEO strategy when we were planning the project. But that's a good piece of info to keep in mind. It means we probably don't want to focus our content around the Portland area only if we're trying to rank for this non-localized keyword. So we've already got when there. And so next is why. And this is our biggest question. So we already said they searched a rather unfocused term, suggesting they're both early in the funnel and that they're not really sure exactly what they're looking for right now. So let's talk about what ideas means a little bit deeper. What might a person searching ideas want literally? Like, what kind of content? What do they want to look at? Because they don't literally want ideas. I mean, they do. That's their ultimate goal, to basically give themselves ideas or their designer ideas or to get ideas to talk through with their spouse. But they don't expect to search Google and spontaneously get a head full of ideas injected into their consciousness somehow, right? In reality, they're looking for something to help them generate ideas. And I think that could be project photos. It could be before and afters. It could be articles about projects. It could be videos. And because this is a visual field, remodeling, it's visual in nature, their intent probably skews toward visual media, so images and video. And my guess is someone looking for ideas isn't interested in reading an article on the history of kitchen design, right? Or any really long piece of content for that matter. They're probably looking for something fairly fast, easily digestible, and they're probably looking for a lot of them. Again, they're trying to generate ideas, and they probably aren't going to spend years on this. So my guess is they'd want lots of ideas, possibly organized in some way, because it's always difficult to wade through a ton of information. And those ideas should be fairly direct and concise, no long blog posts about a single idea that probably won't meet the intent very well. Okay, so our why is sort of in rough shape right now. We're going to clean that up later. We're thinking they want project photos, before and afters, articles about projects. The content should probably skew toward visual media, but text or videos should probably be fairly concise. Okay, so now we're honing in on a pretty good why, and we haven't even spent much time or done much research yet. And this why is actually starting to sound a little bit like what we're doing with our project portfolio. So we could try going after this term with our project portfolio, or maybe a blog post titled Kitchen Remodel Ideas, and pull in some select projects and talk about them with the goal of giving the reader a whole bunch of really quick ideas that would technically meet the intent that we've discovered so far. But would that be enough? Well, we saw the competition for these mid to high funnel terms, and I bet after we take a look at that for this one, we'll find that the competition has such an advantage compared to us as a local remodeling company that we need to hit intent nearly perfectly if we wanted to rank. So we'll come back to why in a minute because there's a lot more detail we can figure out there. But real quick, let's get that last item, the how. And this one's simple. Could be anything, mobile, desktop, tablet, maybe even voice. I'm not sure about voice, but all devices for the most part. So we definitely want to make sure that we have a great mobile experience as well as a great desktop and tablet experience. That's kind of a given in 2019, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Okay, so the next step is we're going to go to Google and search this keyword and think a little more deeply about the why, but we're also going to do a few other things. First, we're going to check out the competition for this keyword and see how they compare to us on EAT and brand awareness, because we need to know how we stack up against that competition, how easy it's going to be to rank, how well we're going to have to meet intent in order to compete. Second, we want to get a better picture of intent. Figure out that why question a little bit more. And finally, we want to see how well the competition is meeting intent and see if there's any gaps there that we can fill. Because remember, we have to be a good bit better than what's already ranking, or Google just doesn't have an incentive to swap us out. Okay, so first of all, let's see who's ranking and how they compare to us on EAT and brand awareness. So we can see we have Lowe's up here at the top, marthastewart.com, housebeautiful.com, I'm not sure what that is, I've never heard of that one, howls.com, I definitely know, HGTV, HGTV again, and then countryliving.com. So these are all pretty big brands. Most of them are media companies for the most part. Lowe's is obviously like a home improvement supply company. And then Houzz is more of a software tool or like a resource site. But these are almost all really big national brands. So they're going to stomp us on brand awareness. But what about EAT? This one's a little harder. We talked in the past about the people who actually do the work typically have more EAT than websites like Houzz.com or TripAdvisor like we talked about in a previous lesson. But if you think about it from the average searcher's perspective, these brands are close enough that the average searcher might perceive their EAT as being much higher than us. So Lowe's sells home improvement products, has a lot of people working there that know what they're talking about, and so they probably have pretty decent EAT. marthastewart.com, I mean, she's pretty well known. She has a TV show. My guess is they probably have experts writing some of these articles. Houzz is similar to TripAdvisor, so we actually have better EAT than Houzz because they're really just a software platform, a website. HGTV, they are definitely going to be perceived as having higher EAT than we are. And then countryliving.com, I guess, is similar to Martha Stewart. It's almost like a home and garden focused media company. And so looking at the competition here, I don't think that the average searcher is going to view us as having more EAT than all of these guys. Maybe one or two of them, but definitely not everybody. And so they've got us on brand awareness. A number of them have us on EAT. And so now we need to think about intent, because intent's really our only opportunity here to hit something out of the park and actually get ranked against these giant competitors. So we need to find out what the intent is, how well the competition is meeting intent, and then if we can do it much better. And so for this, all I'm going to do is pull up my notepad here, and here are my notes on why up to this point. And so I'm just going to click through to all of these competitors. I'm going to poke around the search results a little bit, and I'm going to see what else I can figure out about what someone might be looking for if they're searching this keyword. And this is really simple. Just click on these ranking search results and see what they are. That's the first step. So we can see Houzz is basically like a resource page. You can see they're actually following what we said was the likely intent earlier. They're essentially guiding you to take a next step, right? They've got design ideas for a few design styles here, small kitchen ideas, kitchen pantry, transitional. So this page is basically like a jumping off point or a resource page to get you to a more specific section of the site. Now, countryliving.com just looks like their Pinterest images pulled from people's Pinterest accounts, showing before and afters, and then they're essentially summarizing what was done. And so these are almost like tips. I'd call these tips more than I'd call these ideas. So that's actually not a bad one. Let's write down tips. Incidentally, this is not a very impressive piece of content to meet the intent that we've discovered so far. This site is likely just ranking on brand awareness alone. So Lowe's has a very similar thing. I'm looking at these, and these are all pretty much tips as well. They're talking about adding a backsplash. They're talking about painting cabinets. So yeah, I mean, we could almost say they're ideas, but they're also almost tips. And notice that they're short and concise and a lot of pictures. This is similar to what we were thinking. Let's take a look at Martha Stewart. So Martha Stewart's the same thing. It's just one of these slideshow galleries with Pinterest images pulled from, I imagine, someone's Pinterest account. And these almost all look like tips as well. And also nothing really revolutionary here. Pretty basic. So let's jump over to House Beautiful. Oh, look at this. It's another gallery, and this one actually looks exactly like that other site, and it is owned by Hearst. So these are two sites ranking with basically the same exact content. Also pulling Pinterest images and describing them, so nothing revolutionary here. I'd call those short tips or ideas as well. And so I'm actually not super impressed with the ranking competition for the most part. I think House is doing it right. For sure, assuming the intent is what we think it is, it should be pretty easy to beat those other guys. House, though, is doing pretty well. So let's click these last few results and see what they are. Oh, this is interesting. So this is basically a blog category page, or just like a category page for a section of articles on their site. You can see this is just a list of articles that are related to kitchen design and remodeling. And so that's an interesting approach. I actually like that better than Martha Stewart and those other sites with the galleries. This is basically the same thing as those galleries we saw on the other sites. So nothing new or different or revolutionary here. Okay, so those are all the ranking competition right now. I didn't get anything out of that other than tips. But what I did do is I saw the competition is not meeting intent that well, assuming that we're right about what the intent is here. So we didn't get a lot more stuff, but what else we can do is poke through some of the other items in the search results. So like these people also ask questions. We can see that there's products showing up here at the top. And so we can just take some notes on those. So we have products. Under people also ask, we have costs. So how do we save money? Cost, save money, how to start, cost of IKEA, how much does Home Depot charge? How much should a 10 by 10 kitchen remodel cost? I could see people looking for info on small spaces. I think we saw that on House. And we could actually click through to House because House is following a similar strategy to what we'll probably do. And so we have design styles. This is similar to the research we did before. We're finding the same kind of stuff. So I see kitchen pantry here. So maybe we call that like components of the kitchen. Islands, pantries, etc. So if you just want to remodel the island or redo the pantry itself, redo the cabinets only, something like that. Just one component rather than the whole thing. So that might be an idea. You can see they have products here. They have latest stories. I'm not totally sure what these are on House. I think they're they're basically just blog posts. So that actually wouldn't be a bad idea if we took this approach and put our project portfolio posts in a section like this. Oh, and then they have some DIY information at the bottom. Okay, so the other thing I'm gonna do is go back to some of our research we did before around those mid to high funnel terms. And I'm not going to eliminate stuff that those other search audiences were looking for, because if we're going to compete for this term, we have to meet their intent as well as our customers' intent, because we found earlier that in all likelihood, the DIYers are the highest traffic segment of searchers on these mid to high funnel terms. And so there's no question we really have to meet the needs of those guys and those other segments of searchers as well, or we're probably not going to rank. And that's just because the competition's too high. Their brand awareness and their EAT is already really, really high. So we have to hit a grand slam on intent. So I'm going to do that real quick, come back, and we'll talk about it. All right, so I found TV shows, tools, decor, so information about like decorating the kitchen, companies that can help, resources like building permitting and building codes and stuff like that. So these are pretty broad. I think we can actually eliminate some of these. Companies, I was thinking with this, we could help the person find a remodeling company. I'm not sure about that one. I don't really think somebody's going to search ideas and then be looking for companies. So we could probably eliminate that. But what we could do is potentially add other company portfolios. So links or images from other companies' portfolios to add more ideas to the list if we did a list. I don't think resources is going to make sense. I don't think shows is going to make sense either. I don't see somebody searching ideas looking for information on TV shows about remodeling. Tools I could see, sort of. Decor, yes. Company portfolios, yes. Okay, so this is a pretty big list here, and this gives us a really rough idea of what we think the active and the passive intent is, particularly the why component of that. And so this is rough right now. We would organize this before we turned it into actual content. But before we do that, let's think about the competition. Are they actually meeting this stuff? Not really. We saw most of the sites are really simple galleries. I call them page view pumpers because they're just galleries designed to increase page views, which increases ad revenue because they make you click through to every image. Every image is on a new page. And those are just not a great experience for anybody. So these are a bunch of galleries that aren't really that great. They're using other people's images from Pinterest. That is really just the most basic, minimum viable product approach to getting those sites ranked that they could have possibly come up with. So there's a lot of room to improve. And so they do have project photos, they do have before and afters, they do have tips, they do have a little bit of content about each of those. They are skewed toward visual media, they are short, concise, and to the point, but they don't have any of this other stuff. And they're also not really organized in a way that would facilitate helping you take that next step, right? This article from Lowe's is just 10 or 15 really brief ideas that may not even be applicable to me. I may not want those. I may not like those. A much better approach is what Hal's is doing here. And so this is actually closer to what we would want to do with the format of our content, the layout. Now, it may not be exactly like this. We could almost turn this into a blog post and just break it up into sections if we were limited to only posting blog posts. But if we had free reign, we had a designer, we could do some development work. I definitely recommend creating a jumping off point like this. And what we would do is ideally link to our content on our site, if at all possible. But if we didn't have content to cover one of these items, we could link out to other sites, open it in a new tab or something like that. The idea is that we're essentially creating a jumping off point, a resource for people that meets the intent and meets the searcher where they are, which is they're not really sure what they want to look at. So we need to give them a lot of options. And if we don't have all those options on our site, then we need to get them to other sites. Otherwise, we're just not going to rank. Okay, so we checked out our competitions, EAT and brand awareness, and they're kind of killing us on that. We got some more ideas for intent, really rough right now, but we can refine those later. And we saw the competition is not meeting intent really that well at all. Now, this is assuming we're right in our judgment of what that intent is, but I'm fairly sure that we are. We may not be exactly right, but that term ideas is definitely broad and definitely needs a next step. It needs a resource page or a jumping off point. Okay, so I cleaned up our intent notes a little bit, and here's what we've got for our 5 W's. And I updated the why section here, and I removed some of the specific details like the content categories that might fill out that intent. And I moved those to this doc. So this is a document we might put together for a client project that would go to a content writer, or if we were just doing this SEO work and then handing it off to a writer and design or dev team. It's not something we do for every keyword or every page on the site. We definitely do the research that led to this doc for the important keywords, but a formal document like this isn't really necessary unless we really need to communicate or hand off the work to somebody else. So don't feel like you have to put something like this together for every project. As you get some practice, you'll be able to do much of the research that leads to this doc in 15 or 20 minutes or so. And then you'll have this doc to use as a template. If you need it, I'll add it to a download to the next lesson. And most of this is probably stuff you've seen before for the most part. Title tag recommendations, URL recommendations, target keywords. Again, this doc is more formal than is necessary in many cases. This is just what we use on client projects for important keywords or when we're handing off this work to somebody else. So we have some things in here that won't have a big impact on SEO necessarily. It's just stuff clients typically want to be able to reference. The really important pieces here are the intent research and the content guidance. And this is basically the culmination of all the work we've done so far on this topic, this keyword kitchen remodel ideas. You can go as far as this on your projects if you want to, and that might be better if it's a competitive keyword or a keyword you're trying to eke out some extra performance on, or if you need to communicate this work to somebody else. And so this intent section here is a little background on the intent research we did. You can read it all in the download in the next lesson. It's mostly what we talked about and a good bit of detail added And how much we add to this really depends on the experience of the team we're handing this off to. So if it were a writer who's been through this course and had some practice and guidance, we might not even need to do this at all. They might be able to run with it all themselves once we've determined it's a keyword we want to go after. The next level down from that is we might just validate their research if they put something like this together, or we might just provide some of this ourselves. And then the lightest version of this would just be jotting it down in your notepad. If you're the writer, you're going to do all this research, you're handling this from start to finish, you can put all this in a notepad, but it is helpful to write some of this out. I find that it forces you to sort of challenge your assumptions when you're trying to explain it. And for a really important keyword that's worth taking the time to do. So as we've talked about before, this work would not be necessary if our EAT or our brand awareness was higher relative to the ranking competition. We'd still have to be a lot better than what's already ranking, but we saw they're not all doing that great on intent, so that wouldn't really be too hard. We could do it with just a blog post that contained some of this same information, or even just a really trimmed down version of this that was just a lot better than what's already ranking. Now, I mentioned this page from Houzz was hitting intent better than any of the ranking competition for this keyword because it takes into account where the user is when they searched kitchen remodel ideas. That is, they're early on and they need a little hand-holding for the next step. And so Houzz provides a bunch of options for that next step, and you can see that here. And this is the ideal approach when a keyword is broad like that. You give people a bunch of options, hoping that you'll have an answer for most of the people doing the search on that keyword. You won't get everybody, but you just want to do as much as you need to. In our case, we have to crush intent because we're just this little local remodeling company going up against these huge brands. So we'll include most of what we think are the next steps this user might want to follow. But the cool thing here is that while this Houzz page is a pretty good approach, I actually think they're not fully capturing the intent of this keyword. When we really think about the word ideas, yeah, that person wants photos. We decided that earlier, but I don't think photos alone will suffice. They could work for sure. I could get ideas looking at photos, but I think ideas almost indicates that they want tips, like easily digestible chunks of information. And we said that earlier too, but I think the difference here is that the text or the content that accompanies the photos or the script, if this is a video that we're talking about, that content should provide really concise, punchy guidance for the user. And if we click through to one of these, this is one of the pages linked from that previous landing page we looked at. So the pics are cool, right? But look at the description here. It's just a literal description of what I'm looking at. So it doesn't actually provide that much more information for me as a user than the photos provide. Maybe a little bit if I'm not totally sure what I'm looking at. And the links to the products here and these comments below are definitely a help. They're definitely helping a little bit. But think of what we'd do if we were trying to just spoon feed our users ideas. What would that look like? Like, how could we just get as close as possible to injecting ideas straight into their brain? Because that is how we can really meet intent. And I think that is going to be a combination of this approach with Houzz, where they have like a jumping off point or a resource page linking out to other more specific resources and letting the user self-select which of those are relevant to them. But then when they land on one of those more specific pages, like this one from Houzz, then they actually look more like the tips we saw on those other sites. So for example, this one from Lowe's, where it's just a list of tips, and see how these are all more actionable than just a straight description of the picture I'm looking at. You can see how this one talks about adding a backsplash as an easy way to improve the look of your kitchen. And these other tips are kind of like that too. And so if we had a landing page that was organized like this one from Houzz, and then when you clicked through to one of these ideas, you ended up with either an individual tip like one of these or a list of tips within sort of a common theme. And those tips would be actionable. And so I'm making a bit of an educated guess here on what I think ideas means when somebody searches ideas, that they're really just looking for actionable, bite-size nuggets of information that they can use in their project. And so I could be wrong about that interpretation, but if it's important enough, you could test some slightly different approaches. But I do think that's the intent of that word ideas, to get actionable tips or ideas, things that they can apply really easily and quickly to their next project. And that's because if you take this description from Houzz, in order to make that usable as a tip, or even to get an idea from that, I have to basically take that and translate it into my own project. I have to read this and look at the photo and think, well, that's cool, but what can I actually use here for my project? What did they do? And so what Houzz is introducing here is called friction. It's an added step between your content and the user's goal, and reducing friction will very often lead to improved performance. So there you go, Houzz. You can steal that one if you want to. And that may be why Houzz is not ranking further up the page for this keyword. You can see they're doing all right, but they're not in the top 3. The landing page is great, the organization is great, but the content it links to, I wouldn't necessarily call ideas or tips. It's basically just pictures and links to products. Again, not a bad approach at all. It's probably why they're ranking with limited EAT, but I think that leaves a gap open for us to do better. Okay, so go check out this SEO copy doc example I've put in the next lesson for you to download. Read through it all so you're familiar with what we're talking about here, what we're gonna do. And then I'll add a real quick lesson right after that where I walk through an actual wireframe showing how you might implement this on a project. All right, so here's a wireframe showing how you might implement this idea for this keyword, kitchen remodel ideas. This is just one way to do it. There's a lot of ways to do this. We talked about taking the approach Houzz was taking with this page here, and you could certainly do that, but that's gonna require design and development. It's fairly complex. This might be the all-out approach, but I went with a simpler approach for this wireframe. It's close to being as good, but it would be much, much easier to implement for those of you constrained to only working on, say, the blog. And so this would effectively be our landing page, the page we're trying to rank for this keyword. And so we start out with a title, got a little bit of a description here. I thought this would actually be cool to have a button that says click to see a random tip, and it would just randomly take you to one of these links. Or you could scroll down, and here's a little table of contents. If you click one of these, you'll jump down to the section for that category of ideas. And so we have money-saving ideas, jumps down to money-saving ideas, and then we have links to articles on money-saving ideas. Now these could be on our site, they could be off-site if we don't have these. Since this is a brand new site, we're probably not gonna have these, so I would go grab links out there on the web and add them here and slowly replace them with my own content over time. You can see we got a little CTA here in case somebody wants to get a quote. That may or may not be the best CTA. Maybe learn more about us is a better CTA for somebody on a page like this. But then we've got another section, high ROI ideas. And then another section is simple DIY projects you can do yourself, and so on and so on. So every one of these sections from the table of contents, these are also in the SEO copy doc, would be listed down here, and I just did 3 of them for this example. And so this is a fairly simple example. You could probably put this in a blog, maybe with a little help from a developer to create a custom template for this, but you could even almost simplify this into just a straight up blog post. But remember what I said way back in one of the earliest chapters, and that's when in doubt, make it prettier. That was one of the quick tips to improve your content's performance in search. And because we're such an underdog here on this, compared to the sites that are already ranking, I would definitely take some time to build out a template that would present this information in the best way. Maybe not go all the way as far as what Houzz is doing here, but I think something like this with a lot of links would be the absolute minimum I would do, just because we are so far behind on brand awareness and maybe on EAT a little bit too, at least perceived EAT amongst all the people that would be searching this keyword. So that's it, that's the wireframe. I'll put this as a download in the next lesson as well. And that wraps up this chapter. I know it was a long one. Thank you for hanging in there. You are a rock star.